In the quiet depths of the forest, a hand reaches out to offer a gift to young Shiki, marking the beginning of a new path. Standing amidst the ancient trees, a seasoned warrior presents a pair of twin blades, promising the boy that these tools will help him realize his grandest dreams. He vows to mentor Shiki, teaching him the discipline and skill required to survive as a hunter. With a confident and knowing smile, the master assures his pupil that under his guidance, Shiki will eventually grow into a legendary slayer of monsters, urging him to take the weapons without hesitation. Years of rigorous training culminate in a fierce battle cry as the young hunter lunges forward, his blade drawn against a predatory velocydrome that hisses a challenge in return. He dances through the clearing, engaging the raptor-like creature in a high-stakes test of speed and steel. Despite his pupil's bravado, the master quickly intervenes to correct a reckless approach, sweeping through the lesser monsters with a single, devastating blow. He scolds the boy for his foolishness, reminding him that a true leader focuses on the primary threat while managing the pack. The veteran warrior then imparts a crucial lesson on the philosophy of the hunt, explaining that mastery is forged by risking one's life against the wild, and that success depends on seamless teamwork rather than individual glory. Looking toward the distant horizon, the young apprentice acknowledges the arduous path ahead, his mind firmly set on a legendary serpent that is said to soar far beyond the clouds. He lunges forward, frustration etched on his face as he pursues a squawking, flighty creature. To him, this feels like a waste of time, a mere chase after oversized chickens rather than the grand hunt he envisioned. Seeing the boy's recklessness, the veteran hunter barks a sharp reprimand that cuts through the air. He declares that a true hunter never throws themselves blindly into a fray, and more importantly, they never jeopardize the safety of their comrades. He continues his lecture, emphasizing that there is no place for those who do not trust in their team. The weight of these words causes the young apprentice to falter, his confusion evident as he tries to process the gravity of the lesson. Later, as the crackle of a campfire provides a rhythmic backdrop to the night, the master's tone softens into one of philosophical guidance. He speaks of the true heart required of their kind, a bond of courage and friendship. While the boy listens with wide-eyed wonder, his earlier frustration replaced by a burning desire to understand. Their shared moment of peace is eventually replaced by the cold, silent vigil of a grave marker, standing solitary beneath the pale light of a full moon. A heavy blade is driven into the earth, a grim monument to a life cut short. A somber crowd gathers in the clearing, their heads bowed in a collective moment of mourning. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the quiet rustle of mourning clothes as they pay their final respects to the fallen. They whisper among themselves while reflecting on the man's legacy, noting his skill and the new techniques he was developing. Their eyes eventually drift toward the small, solitary figure of the apprentice, wondering what will become of the boy who was left behind. He is suddenly struck by a memory of his master's grin, vibrant and full of life. The man had told him that while he had shown him the first half of the path, the remaining journey was one the boy would have to navigate on his own, pointing to the mark of a hunter as proof that he was finally ready. He pleaded with his master to wait, tears streaming down his face as he confessed his unreadiness. Grell, however, continued to walk away, his back turned as he explained that the true journey would only begin once Shiki mastered the art of the blade and found his own place among hunters. Desperate to stop the departure, he let out a piercing cry for his master that echoed through the void. Suddenly, the silence of the vision was shattered by the bustling noise of a crowded marketplace, where he found himself standing alone and bewildered as passers-by stared at the strange youth in their midst. Realizing the encounter had been nothing more than a dream, he recoiled in frustration, cursing the fleeting nature of the message. Still caught in the throes of his outburst, he turned his frantic energy toward a startled young woman nearby, shouting his disbelief that his master would appear only in sleep just to deliver such a cryptic farewell. Overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, he threw his head back and wailed toward the sky, expressing his gratitude for his master's kindness and vowing to finally claim his rightful place in the world of hunters. His public display of emotion did not go unnoticed, as the local townspeople began to whisper among themselves, noting that the noisy newcomer was clearly an outsider from a distant land. Ignoring the judgmental glances, he crouched down to consult his notes, confirming that his first objective upon arriving in the city was to locate the local guild. He charges through the streets with reckless abandon, his voice echoing off the stone walls as he announces his arrival. Shiki is a man on a mission, racing toward the local guild while the townspeople scramble to get out of his way, wondering what all the fuss is about. This frantic energy contrasts with the sprawling, sun-drenched city of Okamaya, nestled at the base of a towering, dormant volcano. It is a renowned outpost for those seeking fortune, rare beasts, and the thrill of the hunt, serving as a gateway to the dangerous wilds beyond. At the heart of this bustling settlement stands the Hunters Guild, a sturdy wooden structure adorned with trophies and symbols of the trade. As usual, the building is teeming with life, the air thick with the scent of roasted meat and the low hum of 100 conversations. Inside, the guild is a melting pot of ambitions. Some hunters dream of slaying legendary monsters, while others focus on the craftsmanship of turning trophies into powerful gear. Amidst the chaos, an elderly, diminutive figure sits quietly, puffing on a pipe and observing the diverse crowd of warriors and adventurers with a knowing gaze. Suddenly, the heavy doors swing open as the young newcomer bursts in, thrusting a fist into the air and shouting a challenge to the entire room. He demands to know who among them is in need of a partner, his youthful exuberance cutting through the seasoned atmosphere of the hall. In response, the seasoned veterans nearby barely turn their heads, their expressions a mixture of boredom and mild annoyance. They exchange skeptical glances, unimpressed by the loud display from the improving youth who has just interrupted their peace. The initial silence is quickly broken by a wave of boisterous laughter that ripples through the guild hall. The hunters find his bold entrance more amusing than inspiring, their mocking cheers filling the space as he stands his ground amidst the derision. Despite the ridicule, he remains undeterred, his gaze hardening as he absorbs the reaction of the room. The laughter fades into the background as a quiet, steely resolve settles over his features, signaling that he is not so easily discouraged. He slumps over the wooden table, the weight of his master's instructions pressing down on him. The directive was clear: join a guild and form a team, but the reality of the task is proving far more difficult than he imagined. Suddenly, a heavy thud vibrates through the wood as a shadow looms over him. A sharp voice cuts through the tavern's din, demanding that he clear out of the spot immediately. Standing before him is a young woman with her hair tied in twin tails that resemble feline ears, her gaze cold and territorial. She makes her claim plain: this particular seat belongs to her, and her alone. The young hunter stares back in stunned silence, caught off guard by the sudden confrontation. The air between them crackles with an unexpected tension as they lock eyes. Without waiting for an answer, she slams her massive, fur-wrapped weapon onto the table with a deafening crack, reiterating her demand for him to leave. She notes with a sneer that it's been a long time since anyone had the audacity to ignore her presence like this. Nearby, a group of seasoned hunters erupts into fresh waves of laughter, finding amusement in the newcomer's misfortune. They whisper among themselves that he has truly stepped into it now, having the rotten luck to cross paths with Aerie, the one they call the princess. As she continues to berate him for his perceived arrogance in taking her seat, the surrounding crowd continues their mockery, certain that he's about to be sent packing by the guild's most fearsome young member. Instead of backing down, he looks her straight in the eye with a serious expression, clarifying that he had no intention of bothering her. He explains that he simply wanted to know if she could point him toward anyone else who might still be looking for a team. He leans in, pressing for information, suggesting that since she has been here so long, she must know someone who can help. She remains cold, claiming she has no intention of assisting him, while her small feline companion watches the exchange silently. Because of her sharp dismissal, he simply grins, realizing she is a true regular of the establishment. He acknowledges that the seat he occupied was indeed hers, showing no sign of being deterred by her hostility. In response to his persistence, she slams her mug down and stands abruptly, telling him to find his own team and leave her in peace to prepare for her hunt. Undeterred, he looks up with a bright, hopeful expression and asks if he can join her instead, catching her completely off guard. She turns back with a piercing gaze, her voice dripping with disdain as she declares that she has no need for a team, and certainly no need for someone like him. As she begins to walk away, he stands frozen for a moment, the weight of her rejection finally sinking in as he watches her retreat. Meanwhile, the rest of the guild erupts into boisterous laughter, mocking the newcomer for becoming the 36th person to be shot down by the princess. They cheer her on, clearly entertained by the predictable outcome. The young woman ignores the ruckus, her expression sour as she heads for the exit, while the other hunters continue to hoot and holler at his expense. Seeing his confusion, one of the veteran hunters explains that she always hunts alone and that no one has ever managed to recruit her. He listens intently, realizing the scale of the challenge he has just set for himself. He watches as a group of imposing figures strides through the guild hall, the heavy clatter of their armor drawing everyone's attention. Their rhythmic footsteps ring out against the stone floor, a deliberate and intimidating march that signals the arrival of seasoned veterans. Noticing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere, he looks on with curiosity while the surrounding hunters begin to whisper among themselves, their eyes fixed on the newcomers. When he asks about the group, a nearby veteran warns him that these are the Hellhounds, the most formidable hunters in the guild, known for their reckless efficiency and for recently taking down a Rathian as a trio. He is told it is best not to get involved with them, as they are rumored to be quite eccentric, though their skill is undeniable. At the center of the group stands their leader, a man known as the Prince, who carries himself with an air of effortless superiority and wields a massive blade. He approaches the blonde hunter with a casual greeting, but she immediately brushes him off, demanding he move aside so she can begin her hunt. Despite her cold reception, he offers his assistance with a smug smile, prompting her to snap back that his help is unwanted and he should stay out of her way. Watching the exchange, the young hunter wonders what kind of powerful individual this man truly is. As he continues to press his offer, his companions mock her stubbornness, suggesting she finally accept the help of someone as prestigious as their leader. They laugh at her refusal, noting that she should be grateful for the prince's attention, while he remains calm, urging her to reconsider his proposal. He is hailed as a first-class hunter by the onlookers, a model for any aspiring warrior to follow. Hearing the title, Shiki's eyes bulge in realization, and he bellows the leader's name with a mix of awe and intensity that echoes through the hall. This sudden outburst causes a sharp contrast in reactions. While the blonde girl narrows her eyes in clear irritation, the swordsman maintains a cool, almost bored composure, his gaze steady and unbothered by the commotion. Ignoring the tension, the young newcomer rushes forward, his excitement overflowing as he confirms that these are indeed the legendary hunters he has been searching for. He observes their small numbers, noting they only have 3 members, and eagerly asks if there might be room for one more in their ranks. He introduces himself with a wide, confident grin as Shiki Ryu, a wandering master of dual blades. The leader of the Hellhounds remains unimpressed, his expression flat as he bluntly asks what the boy could possibly want from them. With a dismissive smirk, the veteran hunter points out that the boy isn't even a registered member of the guild, making his request laughable. Behind him, his goggled companion watches silently, while the girl in twin tails looks on with a mixture of disbelief and annoyance at the boy's audacity. He turns his back on the conversation, declaring that he has no intention of wasting his time with some random, wandering novice. In the background, the boy's jaw drops in shock at the blatant rejection, while the other hunters nearby whisper about the newcomer's lack of awareness. Continuing his walk, the swordsman explains his philosophy. He refuses to associate with unknown, unskilled hunters because it simply isn't cool. His tone is dripping with elitism, leaving no room for further argument from the stunned youth. As he looks around, he realizes the girl has already stormed off, leaving him to conclude his thoughts aloud. He muses that, for now, she remains the only candidate truly worthy of joining their elite circle, a sentiment that highlights his singular focus on her talent. He watches Eri depart with a smug, self-assured grin, convinced that her cold shoulder is merely a mask for her shyness. His companions can only marvel at his unwavering optimism, though he remains focused solely on the princess who just walked away. His arrogance triggers a sharp reaction from the young hunter with the spiky hair, who snaps and corrects the leader on his name, Shiki Ryu. Shiki makes it clear that his face and name won't be easily forgotten, bluntly retracting his interest and stating he no longer has any desire to join such a group. He is met with a dismissive scoff from the swordsman, who closes his eyes as if the very effort of acknowledging the boy is beneath him. The leader refuses to waste energy remembering someone he considers nothing more than a nuisance. He then turns his attention back to his own elite squad, checking the time and noting that they have far more important matters to attend to, specifically the powerful monsters awaiting them. He reminds his team of their current objective, completely ignoring the boy he just insulted. They begin to depart, their laughter echoing through the street, though the goggled hunter lingers for a moment to acknowledge the boy's spirit. He is genuinely surprised that anyone would have the nerve to engage in such a heated exchange with their leader. He leans in, explaining that the prince isn't just a title. He is the son of a major guild sponsor, which grants him significant influence. He offers a final, stern warning to the boy, advising him not to push his luck any further. They finally clear out, and the young hunter turns his attention to a nearby woman tending the stalls, addressing her with familiar warmth. She looks back at him with a start, surprised by his sudden shift in focus. He leans over the counter, his curiosity piqued by the girl who had been there moments before. He asks the woman if she knows what kind of quest the blonde hunter had been assigned, determined to follow her trail. He listens as the barmaid describes the target of Eri's quest, a Yayan Kutku, a winged lizard of moderate danger. She reassures him that the girl is more than capable and likely won't face any real trouble against such a beast, which is known for its distinctive frill and sharp beak. Despite her reassurances, he expresses his intent to follow, but she immediately shuts him down, explaining that Ares specifically told the client she would handle the task entirely on her own. He considers this, his mind already made up to see the creatures for himself, and resolves to set out after her regardless of the warning. He is met with a stern reminder as the barmaid points toward the quest board, emphasizing a fundamental rule of the Hunter's Guild that applies everywhere. While a contract is active, only the assigned hunter is permitted to enter the designated hunting grounds. She understands his curiosity as a newcomer, but insists that this protocol is absolute and must be followed by everyone. He presents a small, sharp trophy to the woman behind the counter, asking if such a find is sufficient for his needs. Her eyes widen in pure shock as she realizes exactly what the young man is holding. Seeing her stunned expression, he lets out a triumphant, wide-toothed grin. Behind her, the other hunters in the room are frozen in disbelief, their voices trembling as they recognize the rare mark of a true predator. With his business at the guild concluded, he steps out into the fresh air of the village. As a cheerful wish of good luck follows him out the door, he wonders to himself if this latest achievement finally makes him worthy of following in her footsteps. The path leads him deep into the untamed wilds, where the horizon is dominated by jagged rock formations and the silent majesty of distant, snow-capped mountains. Further along the trail, the landscape opens into a wide valley where a herd of gentle, thick-skinned beasts grazes peacefully amidst the sparse vegetation. He continues his trek through the rugged terrain, navigating through narrow passes and dense thickets where the wild world feels close and watchful. Nearby, the princess crouches in the undergrowth, her massive weapon gripped tightly as she assures herself that the current hunt will be effortless. Her concentration is suddenly broken by the sharp clink of gear and the unmistakable, heavy thud of something large approaching. She whirls around in total astonishment to find a young hunter standing there, casually balancing the massive, bloodied carcass of a tusked beast on his shoulders. He offers a breezy greeting, seemingly unaware that he is carrying a load that would stagger most veteran hunters. He casually explains that the beast he brought was merely a cut coup, insisting he only wanted to assist with her hunt. She, however, is far from appreciative, demanding to know why he has intruded on her territory. He simply laughs it off, noting that a hunter shouldn't track prey on an empty stomach. With a nostalgic smile, he remarks that she truly reminds him of his old master. He recalls how his mentor always looked out for his companions, a trait he clearly sees mirrored in her, even if she refuses to admit it. The warmth of the moment is instantly shattered as a cold blade is pressed against his throat. His eyes widen in genuine shock at the sudden, lethal escalation. She glares at him with icy resolve, her weapon held steady. She commands him to leave immediately, declaring with absolute finality that she refuses to complete this mission with a partner, regardless of who they might be. As she keeps her massive blade leveled at him, he frantically reminds her that pointing a hunting weapon at another person is a grave violation of the guild's rules. Unmoved, she insults him, calling him nothing more than a pest that needs to vanish before she loses her patience entirely. Turning her back on him, she dismisses his master's teachings as irrelevant to her own path. He watches her walk away, his confusion growing as he asks why she is so determined to keep everyone at a distance. Suddenly, the tension between them is replaced by a shared instinct as they both freeze, sensing a presence in the brush. They whisper for silence, realizing that a predator is lurking dangerously close to their position. A colossal shadow suddenly sweeps over the rocky terrain, blotting out the sun. While she tries to maintain focus on their target, he looks up in awe, realizing the threat is descending upon them from the sky. He stares upward, jaw dropping in disbelief as the massive creature eclipses the sun. Beside him, the girl's face pales with pure dread. The beast is a Rathian, a green-scaled wyvern of immense size, its wings spanning the width of the clearing as it prepares to descend. As the wyvern slams into the earth, the ground tremors beneath its weight. It lets out a deafening roar, asserting its dominance as the queen of the land. The two hunters are dwarfed by its sheer scale, standing in the shadow of a predator that outclasses anything they have ever faced. The young woman is paralyzed by the impossibility of the situation, her mind racing to understand how such a high-level threat could appear in this territory. In stark contrast, her companion's eyes widen with a manic thrill. Rather than fear, he feels the electric surge of adrenaline, eager for the challenge of a legendary hunt. She screams at him to snap out of it, frantically explaining that this is no mere cut coup. This is a monster that has remained undefeated, earning its royal title through blood and fire. Her voice cracks as she demands they retreat immediately before it is too late. He barely has time to process her warning before the air itself seems to turn against them. A sudden, violent pressure erupts, catching them both off guard and lifting them off their feet as the monster begins its assault. With a swift, brutal motion, the Rathian lashes out with its spiked tail. The force of the blow is catastrophic, sending the two hunters spiraling through the air like ragdolls as the beast's power levels the surrounding terrain. The nightmare intensifies as the creature unhinges its jaw, unleashing a torrent of flame that turns the clearing into an inferno. He can hardly believe the scale of the destruction, coughing through the thick smoke as he realizes the true gap in their power. Finding herself pinned and battered on the scorched earth, she looks up at him with desperate eyes. She begs him to ignore her and save himself, knowing that if he stays to help, the queen will ensure neither of them leaves this forest alive. She looks up in disbelief as the young hunter refuses to abandon her. His eyes burn with a new resolve. his fear replaced by a stubborn defiance. As the dust settles from the monster's last strike, he suddenly scoops her up, hoisting her onto his shoulder. He declares loudly that he would never leave a comrade in danger, a sentiment that leaves her utterly bewildered, questioning when exactly they became comrades. Above them, the Rathian lets out a deafening roar, its massive form silhouetted against the sky before it lunges again. He quickly proposes a new plan. If they can't defeat the beast individually, they must combine their strengths and face it together. She, however, remains skeptical, wondering how he could possibly think they stand a chance. He responds with a wide, confident grin, insisting that they absolutely can succeed. He warns her that if one doesn't believe in their own power, then failure is the only certain outcome. Looking into his eyes, she feels a shift in her own perspective, recalling the core tenets of their craft. To be a true hunter is to be devoted to the task and true to one's heart. Inspired by his conviction, she finally admits to herself that she believes they can win. Their moment of resolve is shattered as the Rathian's spiked tail sweeps through the air with bone-crushing force. The impact sends him flying backward into the debris, prompting a cry of alarm from her as she realizes the extent of the injuries he's already sustained. Despite the brutal blow, he pushes himself back to his feet, a feral, almost predatory smile spreading across his face. He draws his twin blades, his aura shifting into something far more dangerous as he announces that the real fight is only just beginning. She watches in stunned silence, captivated by the sudden, intense transformation in his demeanor. As he readies his weapons, the air around them seems to crackle with the weight of his newfound power. She watches in terror as the Rathian lunges forward, its massive claws tearing into the earth and sending a cloud of debris into the air. As the beast closes in, her gaze shifts to the young hunter, whose hand tightens around his hilt as a strange, localized gale begins to whip around him. She can only stare in disbelief, questioning the nature of the power he is about to unleash. The swirling air intensifies into a veritable hurricane as he takes a wide stance, brandishing dual blades that seem to command the very wind. She whispers the name of the technique in awe, recognizing the wind swords as a force beyond anything she expected. With a sudden burst of speed, he strikes, his blades biting into the Rathian's snout with the force of a gale. She reflects on her long history with various hunting tools, realizing that even the most exotic elemental weapons she has encountered pale in comparison to this raw, atmospheric power. He continues his relentless assault, leaping through the air to deliver another crushing blow that staggers the dragon. She remains frozen, her mind racing with the realization that such a weapon is likely unknown even to the highest ranks of the guild, until his sharp command to snap out of it and move while he draws the beast's attention finally breaks her trance. Taking advantage of the opening, he slides beneath the creature's massive frame, his blades a blur as they carve through its thick hide. The Rathian roars in pain, unable to track the movements of the hunter who dances through the wind. Watching him fight with such selfless intensity, she finally understands the true essence of a hunter, a realization that hits her harder than any physical blow. He reaffirms his resolve, shouting over the din of battle that he will never, under any circumstances, abandon a comrade in need. Because of this unwavering conviction, he stands his ground against the towering monster, the two of them locked in a deadly stalemate as the dust of their clash begins to settle. He stumbles, clutching his face in agony as his vision fails him. Beside him, the princess urges him to keep going, even as the Rathian looms over them with a deafening roar, its jaws snapping at the air. Despite the darkness clouding his sight, he flashes a confident grin, dismissing her concern. He reasons that she must have blinded him intentionally, a tactical move to sharpen his other senses and force him to focus entirely on the rhythm of the hunt. Though she looks back at him with utter confusion. With a thunderous cry, the swordsman launches himself high into the air, his dual blades catching the light as he prepares to strike from above. As he descends, the princess charges forward with renewed vigor, her own weapon ready. The two hunters converge on the beast from both sides, their movements a blur of coordinated aggression that leaves the monster with no room to escape. The impact is cataclysmic. He swings his twin blades in a wide, powerful arc, the force of the wind sword's technique tearing through the air and sending a shower of stone and dust flying as the Rathian is finally brought low. Standing amidst the settling dust, he lets out a breathless laugh, his face smeared with sweat and grime, but lit up by the pure joy of the victory. She watches him, her initial skepticism replaced by a look of genuine awe and a burgeoning respect for the unconventional hunter who just accomplished the impossible. Looking down at the fallen beast, she can hardly believe their success, noting that while she had originally only hoped to see a cut coup, defeating a Rathian is a feat far beyond her wildest expectations. She watched as he tilted his head back, laughing heartily while pouring water from a canteen into his mouth. He claimed to be nothing more than a wandering hunter, prompting her to ask if he would finally share more about his past. In response, he pulled back his sleeve to reveal a dark, intricate mark etched into his skin. Her eyes widened in disbelief at the sight, realizing this was why he wasn't registered with any local guild. The symbol was a rare seal, a sign granting the bearer the freedom to move across all lands without restriction. He grinned, flexing his arm to show the mark clearly, confirming its authenticity with a confident nod. Standing tall with his gear slung over his shoulder, he explained that this was the mark of a hunter pursuing a singular, extraordinary objective. It set him apart from those who hunted for mere sport or survival. He continued, noting that while he must report his findings to the nearest guild, the mark granted him the absolute right to hunt in any territory, regardless of the circumstances or local laws. Looking out over the vast, sun-drenched landscape, he finally declared his ultimate ambition, to find and defeat the legendary dragon, Myogaluna. The weight of his words hung in the air, revealing the true scale of his journey. When she asked if he truly believed such a creature existed, he described it with reverence, calling it a being that appears only at night, shining with the brilliance of 1,000 stars, yet possessing the ferocity of a demon from the deepest hell. Tears began to well in her eyes as she listened to his conviction. The mention of the legendary dragon seemed to strike a deep, emotional chord within her, leaving her momentarily speechless. She remains hunched over, tears streaming down her face, leaving the young hunter completely bewildered. He stares at her, his mouth agape, unable to comprehend why his words caused such a sudden outburst of grief. Panicking, he clutches his head and cries out to his departed master, wondering what he could have possibly said wrong. The weight of the situation presses down on him as he desperately searches for a way to fix the unintended hurt he caused. He eventually manages to stammer out a clumsy apology, but she looks up, her eyes still wet, and explains that her reaction wasn't born of anger. She admits that she has simply never met anyone else who truly believed in the existence of Myogaluna, the dragon her father spoke of so often. She continues, her voice trembling as she recalls how her father mentioned the legendary beast every single day. He was so certain of its existence that his conviction became a part of her own life, a shared belief that bound them together. Her gaze drifts as she recounts the tragic end of his life, explaining that he perished in a terrible accident while developing a new type of gunpowder. She then reveals a startling detail. Her father bore the exact same mark on his arm that the young hunter carries now. The revelation leaves him speechless, his mind racing to connect the pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. He tentatively asks if her father's name happened to be Grell, the very man who had raised and trained him. The truth hits them both like a physical blow, and they shout in unison, their voices echoing with disbelief. He realizes she is the daughter of his beloved master, while she discovers that this stranger is the apprentice her father had always spoken of. As the shock begins to settle, she looks at him with new eyes, memories of her father's stories about a young boy with strange features flooding back. The connection is undeniable. They are bound by the legacy of the same man, two pieces of a past finally brought together by fate. She watches as he clenches his fist in a surge of sudden conviction, declaring this moment to be destiny. He breaks into a sprint, his boots kicking up dust as he rushes toward the horizon with newfound purpose. Reaching the edge of a high ridge, he stands silhouetted against the vast, sun-drenched valley below. With his arms spread wide, he bellows a heartfelt thanks for the opportunity and calls out to his departed master, his voice echoing across the landscape. He turns back to her, his eyes bright with an infectious enthusiasm as he proclaims that together, they will fulfill his master's dream. He is certain of their success, believing that their shared objective binds them in a way that cannot be broken. She listens, a soft smile touching her lips as a memory of her father surfaces. In her mind's eye, she sees his face and hears his voice once more, reminding her that when people pursue the same goal, nothing can stand in their way, that this shared path is the very essence of team. Contemplating the word, she repeats it quietly to herself, finding a strange comfort in the idea. The weight of her solitary journey seems to lift, replaced by the quiet resolve of someone who is no longer traveling alone. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain, a profound stillness settles over the world. The moment of revelation passes, leaving behind a landscape transformed by the promise of a new alliance. Back at the bustling hub of the hunters, the banners bearing the guild's mark flutter gently against the wooden walls. Inside, the air is thick with the usual clamor of trade and talk, though the atmosphere feels charged with fresh rumors. The local hunters exchange whispers about the latest news, noting with surprise that Aerie has officially formed a party with the energetic newcomer. As they prepare to depart on their first joint expedition, the onlookers speculate on what this unlikely duo might achieve together. He stands quietly in the background of the bustling guild hall, watching as the nobleman in the foreground grapples with a startling realization. The prince mutters about legends he once thought were mere stories, his voice trembling with the weight of a truth he can no longer deny. Suddenly, a violent explosion rips through the structure, sending debris flying and shattering the peace of the afternoon. Panic erupts instantly as those nearby scramble for safety, their shouts of alarm lost in the roar of destruction as they wonder what has possessed the prince to act so recklessly. Amidst the settling dust and rising smoke, a lone figure remains standing, a dark silhouette against the devastation. The name Shiki Ryuhu is uttered like a curse, hanging heavy in the air as the source of this sudden, focused violence. His face contorts with a cold, focused fury as he stares into the wreckage. The prince vows with chilling certainty that he will leave nothing left of his target, his resolve hardening into a promise of total annihilation for the one who has returned. Meanwhile, the young hunter marches down a winding path far from the chaos, his voice booming with excitement as he calls out to his absent master. He boasts about finally having a partner, though his companion quickly snaps at him to be quiet, clearly annoyed by his boisterous energy. He continues to beam, insisting that their alliance makes them a true team. She counters with a sharp, pragmatic edge, clarifying that her presence is strictly a matter of shared objectives rather than any personal bond or friendship. As they bicker and walk, the vast world opens up before them, indifferent to their small squabbles. This moment marks the true beginning of a journey that history will eventually remember as the legendary adventure of Shikiru, a path fraught with both wonder and the shadow of those who seek his end. A sudden, violent surge of electricity courses through him, momentarily revealing his skeleton as he screams out for his master in agony. After the shock subsides, she looks down at the mangled remains of a mechanical device, realizing with a sigh of frustration that it was a trap intended to secure food, now utterly ruined. He stands there with his hair frizzed from the lightning, indignantly pointing out that she could have warned him, reminding her that they're supposed to be working as a team. As they trek deeper into the dense forest, she dismisses his claim, arguing that they merely share a common goal and are far from being a team, prompting him to remark that she is even more cantankerous than his old master. He tries to bridge the gap by mentioning his apprenticeship under her father, but she remains cold, bluntly stating that despite the connection, she still finds him quite unlikable. Their bickering is interrupted by the sound of distant weeping, leading him to wonder who could be so sensitive in such a place, while she bitterly notes that her father clearly preferred training him over spending time with his own daughter. Shifting the conversation to more practical matters, she gestures toward his weapons and inquires about the materials used to forge them. He draws one of his blades, the wind sword Hurricane, explaining that his master claimed they were crafted from a rare monster skin he discovered, perhaps even that of the legendary Mayoguruna. He remains the subject of her thoughts as she ponders the mystery of his twin blades. She wonders why their master would expend such effort to craft two swords instead of one, especially given the rarity of the materials required for such an unusual element. Looking out over the quiet forest, she continues to puzzle over the choice. Their master, Grell, was a renowned expert with the greatsword, yet he chose to train his pupil in a completely different style. The inconsistency feels deliberate, and she refuses to believe it was merely a whim. This skepticism leads her to recall their master's warm, bashful smile whenever he spoke of his daughter. Shiki laughs off her doubts, jokingly claiming he was clearly the favorite student. She retorts with a sharp tongue, questioning just how many favorites the old man actually had, though he insists he was the one Grell saw potential in as a hunter. Her expression softens for a fleeting moment as the weight of the memory settles, the usual fire in her eyes replaced by a quiet contemplation. Seeing her quiet down, the young swordsman offers a genuine, wide-eyed smile. He reassures her that their master undoubtedly loved her deeply. He admits, with a hint of melancholy, that having never known his own parents, he actually feels a bit envious of the bond she shared with her father. The sincerity of his words catches her off guard, and she turns to look at him, his name barely a whisper on her lips. He meets her gaze with a confused look, the moment of quiet connection hanging in the air between them. That silence is shattered instantly as a massive, tusked beast erupts from the brush. He bellows a warning for her to watch her back as the creature charges with thunderous force, tearing through the undergrowth. With the threat swiftly neutralized, she stands over the fallen beast with a confident smirk, declaring that they will be feasting on stew tonight. In the distance, her companion can only laugh, acknowledging her prowess as a hunter. She stands by the crackling campfire, her thoughts turning toward their ultimate goal as she questions where they should even begin their search for the legendary Mayoguruna. He responds with his mouth full of food, bluntly pointing out that if he actually knew the creature's location, they wouldn't be wandering aimlessly through the wilderness. This lack of direction infuriates her, but he quickly clarifies that their path requires finding another marked hunter who can lead them to their prize. She grows somber, acknowledging that their current weaponry is far too weak for such a hunt, and recalls her master's notes regarding a master blacksmith hidden in this region. The young hunter agrees, realizing that while traveling and hearing tales is fine, they cannot afford to keep wandering without a clear destination to find this craftsman. Inspired by the plan, he leaps to his feet and shouts a mantra from their master about turning fairy tales into a living reality. He is genuinely impressed by her foresight, though she remains practical, insisting they must seek out the locals to gather information if they hope to find their way. Suddenly, his playful demeanor vanishes as he detects the unmistakable ring of steel and the roar of a monster echoing from a nearby clearing. He points a finger at his companion, questioning the nature of the cat-like ears atop her head. She reacts with immediate indignation, insisting they aren't ears at all, which only leads him to conclude that she must possess 4 ears in total. Continuing their trek through the dense woods, he speculates with wide-eyed wonder that the blacksmith they seek might be some legendary hermit. She quickly hushes him, urging caution as they navigate the brush, while privately doubting that a master craftsman would choose to live in such a desolate wilderness. The path soon opens into a clearing scarred by fallen timber and scattered debris, a sight that he finds strangely impressive. She, however, remains wary, noting the oddity of the destruction and questioning the hermit's choice of residence. Their journey finally brings them to a peculiar structure, a forge built into the very earth and venting steam into the air. He announces their arrival with a shout of joy, his heart full of anticipation, while she looks on with a mix of curiosity and lingering doubt. Inside, the forge is a chaotic workshop of discarded metal and worn tools, echoing with the rhythmic, metallic clanging of work being done behind a heavy door. Upon seeing a jagged, broken blade resting on a workbench, he gasps in awe at its rugged design. She is far less impressed, staring at the damaged weapon with a look of utter confusion. Sifting through the clutter, she picks up a rusted piece of metal, dismissing the entire collection as nothing more than a pile of useless junk. Suddenly, the door swings open to reveal a young woman named Shiki, her gaze sharp despite the eye patch covering one eye and the thick bandages wrapping her arm. As she enters carrying a heavy smithing hammer, he and his companion are struck silent by her presence. He immediately notices her injuries, wondering if this wounded woman is indeed the master they have been searching for. She watches in silence as the two travelers bicker about their location. Shiki, clearly frustrated, questions if they've come to the wrong place, while Eri remains skeptical of the surroundings, doubting they've found the master they seek. Because of the dilapidated state of the forge, the pair huddles together to whisper. Shiki gestures toward the rusted, worn-out weapons littering the area, while Eri expresses her doubt that a first-class blacksmith could ever work in such a neglected place. Interrupting their private conversation, the young woman reveals that the master they seek is likely her father. She stands with a calm but weary expression, her bandaged face and tired eyes telling a story of hardship and isolation. The revelation leaves them both gaping in surprise, their voices rising in unison as they repeat the word father. Eri, however, remains unimpressed, noting that the quality of the blade she sees around her doesn't match the reputation of a master. Continuing her explanation, she clarifies that while her father is indeed a renowned blacksmith, he has long since departed from this home, leaving the forge to fall into its current state of disrepair. She speculates that he might be found in the city, a place he always yearned for, before adding with a sharp edge to her voice that he abandoned his ailing wife and child to pursue that dream. The weight of her words leave Shiki and Eri speechless and stunned. Shifting the focus away from her family's painful history, she takes a moment to inspect their equipment, noting the unique and interesting craftsmanship of their weapons and armor. She then asks if they're a formal hunting party. They exchange a slightly awkward glance before Shiki clarifies that they aren't exactly a team, but rather companions traveling together on a shared journey. He watched in surprise as Shiki suddenly lunged forward, her hands gripping the fabric of Eri's jacket with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The blacksmith's eyes widened as she recognized the material, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and realization. Startled by the sudden physical contact, the princess recoiled, but Shiki was undeterred, insistently demanding that she remove the garment immediately. The blacksmith's professional curiosity had completely overtaken her social graces, leaving her guest flustered and confused by the urgent request. As the tension rose, she tried to explain that her interest was purely technical, driven by the rare sight of dermosa skin. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, the blacksmith's focus remained laser-sharp on the craftsmanship of the gear, ignoring the protests of the young woman standing before her. Moments later, the various pieces of the hunting attire were laid out across the workshop floor for a thorough inspection. Shiki moved from one component to the next, her experienced eyes cataloging every stitch and reinforcement. While the princess sat nearby, feeling exposed and impatient, the blacksmith marveled at the combination of high-grade materials. She noted the expert integration of derma fur, malachite, and rubies, admitting that while the work was somewhat rugged, the quality and durability were undeniable. Nearby, the young hunter examined the gauntlets, his expression one of quiet appreciation for the gear that had served them so well. He seemed to share Sakuya's fascination, though his perspective was that of a warrior who relied on the equipment's protection in the heat of battle. Continuing her assessment, the blacksmith remarked that she had never seen such materials used in this specific way before. She acknowledged that while it appeared to be standard hunting armor at first glance, the choice of components made it a remarkably solid and reliable piece of craftsmanship. As the princess pulled her jacket back on, she dismissed the praise, claiming there was nothing special about the gear and that any hunter could handle a Delmeok. Sakuya fell silent, her gaze dropping as she processed the casual dismissal of a craft she clearly held in much higher regard. She sits in a somber silence, her head bowed as she admits her own perceived weakness. Eri stands nearby, offering a soft apology, but the blacksmith remains focused on her own limitations, confessing that she simply isn't strong enough to overcome the beast that haunts her. This weight of failure stems from her tragic past, a time when a monster descended upon her home and claimed her mother's life with its toxic breath. Left alone in the shadow of the creature's nearby nest, she was forced to grow up in a constant state of fear amidst the ruins of her childhood. Driven by a need for vengeance, she swore an oath to reclaim what was lost and became a skilled blacksmith in the process. Her every effort was poured into crafting a weapon that could withstand the devastating power of the Ermaosu, the very creature that had shattered her world. Despite her dedication, the physical toll of her quest is evident in the bandages and scars she carries, a grim reminder of a previous encounter where she barely escaped with her life. She looks at Shiki with a heavy heart, acknowledging that even with her skills, the monster remains an insurmountable wall. Yet, the fire of her resolve has not been extinguished, and she draws a massive, intricately crafted blade with a sudden burst of determination. She declares with fierce conviction that she will never surrender, her spirit unyielding despite the overwhelming odds. The sight of the impressive weapon leaves Shiki and Eri in awe, their eyes wide as they realize the extent of her craftsmanship. Eri eagerly asks if she forged the blade herself, recognizing the incredible skill required to create such a formidable tool. Inspired by her tenacity, Shiki pounds his chest and boldly offers his assistance, refusing to let her face the danger alone. Eri seconds the motion, noting that it would be wrong to leave an injured warrior to struggle against such a monster without support. Though she's moved by their offer, she admits she has no idea where the creature currently resides, casting a shadow of doubt on their plan. Seizing the moment, Eri proposes a trade. They will help her find and defeat the beast if she, in turn, reveals the whereabouts of her father. She is the focus of a knowing smile from Sakuya as the group prepares to depart. Alongside Shiki, who is practically vibrating with energy and declaring his intent to hunt the Ermaosu, she remains optimistic about finding the creature's location through the guild. As they depart, their voices drift across the quiet landscape, a simple word of gratitude lingering in the air before the scene shifts to the rugged wilderness. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by the brutal impact of a hunt in progress. A massive, dark-furred beast reels from a powerful blow, its form partially obscured by the sheer force of the attack. Below the chaos, the prince watches with a cold, calculating intensity, his focus entirely on the kill. He watches as the struggle ends with a thunderous crash as the great winged predator is brought low, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris that swallows the immediate area. He lets out a long, weary breath, the adrenaline of the fight slowly receding as he stands amidst the settling dust. Beside him, his goggled companion offers a stern reminder that their unsanctioned hunt is a direct violation of guild law, an act that could carry heavy consequences. The repercussions of his actions echo through the nearby settlement, where the local inhabitants look on with a mixture of fear and indignation. A voice cries out, accusing the hunters of recklessly disrupting the delicate balance of the natural world. As the accusations ring out, he makes his way through the village streets, his expression unreadable. His companion, however, is far more vocal, dismissively arguing that their status grants them the right to hunt wherever they see fit, regardless of local regulations. He remains silent as the argument continues, with the goggled man doubling down on his belief in a hunter's inherent honor and the righteousness of their battle. The prince remains unconvinced, pointedly reminding his subordinate that true hunters are bound by duty to report their actions to the guild, a duty they have just blatantly ignored. The prince observes the mark on his hand, noting how some are drawn to the mark. He dismisses the concerns of those who worry about the ecosystem, arguing that hunting without permission leads to extinction, but a true hunter, especially one with a seal, would never allow that. His companion, the goggled hunter, can't contain his excitement, calling the marked hunters cool legends who roam the world challenging myths. He muses that if he had such a seal, he'd use it quite differently. With a predatory grin, the nobleman scoffs at the notion of a food chain, declaring that only the strongest survive. He envisions a future 1,000 years from now where not a single monster remains in the world. The goggled hunter looks up at him, simply uttering his title in a tone of quiet realization. He then makes a bold proclamation. He has decided that he will become one of the marked himself. This declaration leaves his subordinate stunned, as he stammeringly reminds his leader that such a feat requires the explicit permission of the High Guild. Nearby, the young warrior watches from the shadows, his resolve hardening as he refuses to let this arrogant newcomer be the only one to wield such power. He vows to prove that his own strength is superior. Turning away with a look of intense focus, he commands his companions to stay behind, asserting that this hunt belongs to him alone. The ambitious hunter stands amidst the settling dust of a powerful impact, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. His expression hardens with resolve as he addresses Shiki Ryu, promising to demonstrate the true extent of his capabilities. Standing before the towering, frozen remains of a desert beast, he boldly proclaims his destiny to be the first to discover the legendary Myogaruna. Deep within the labyrinthine caves, the silence is heavy, broken only by the distant dripping of water against the jagged stone. As the group navigates the eerie tunnels, Eri turns to Sakuya with a heavy question, asking if she harbors hatred for her father, while Shiki marvels at the unsettling atmosphere of their surroundings. He stops short, his eyes widening in disbelief at a sudden discovery, while Sakuya reflects quietly on the past, admitting that while she once wondered what might have been, she now accepts that the past is unchangeable. They find themselves before a grotesque sight, a massive, pale creature fused into the very rock of the cavern, its body unnaturally still and hardened. Staring at the petrified Keizu, he mistakenly identifies it as a Dromerios before demanding to know what could have caused such a transformation, while Eri corrects him and confirms the identity of the monster, now nothing more than a silent monument in the dark. He listened intently as the blacksmith clarified the mystery of the petrified remains, explaining that the creature wasn't truly turned to stone, but was instead encased in a hardened shell produced by a Delmeok. Before the explanation could sink in, a violent tremor suddenly rocked the entire cavern, signaling a massive presence nearby. He spotted the source of the disturbance as the ground erupted in a cloud of debris. The prince quickly commanded the group to scatter, hoping that by splitting up, they could disorient the emerging threat and find an opening to strike. The earth shattered completely as a jagged, predatory beak tore through the rock, catching the young huntress off guard. She could only stare in shock as the beast forced its way into the chamber with terrifying strength. It loomed over them, a Delmeok of such immense proportions that it defied everything she knew about the species. The sheer scale of the feathered monster was overwhelming, dwarfing the hunters and the petrified remains alike. She realized with growing dread that this was no ordinary specimen. Its cry and its aura suggested a different, far more dangerous subspecies. The realization hit her hard as the monster let out a piercing, territorial screech. The creature didn't hesitate, launching a sweeping attack that tore through the cavern with blinding speed. The force of the blow sent shockwaves through the air, scattering the hunters like leaves in a storm. He was thrown backward by the impact, tumbling across the uneven ground as the blacksmith called out his name in alarm. The sheer power of the beast had completely disrupted their formation in a single move. She stood paralyzed by a sense of helplessness, her mind racing as she admitted she had no idea how to combat a monster of this magnitude. As the massive tail of the beast swung toward them again, she could only scream a desperate warning for everyone to get back. She watches in horror as the battle turns dire. Shiki lunges forward, but his blade begins to liquefy upon contact with the beast's corrosive secretions. Sakuya cries out in alarm as the weapon fails, and the massive creature retaliates with a crushing blow that sends them reeling. The princess feels a surge of frustration as the gravity of their situation sinks in. Sakuya explains that the monster uses its acid to digest those it is already encased in stone, making a direct assault nearly impossible. It is a level of threat the seasoned hunter has never encountered before. The towering silhouette of the Ermeok looms over them, a monument to their impending defeat. Beyond its sheer size and physical power, its unnatural abilities have left them broken. Shiki lies unconscious, and Sakuya is now effectively defenseless. Recognizing the futility of the struggle, she urgently calls for a retreat, admitting she underestimated the foe and needs time to regroup. However, the blacksmith remains rooted to the spot, her gaze fixed on the monster as she declares her intention to stay. A somber smile touches the woman's lips as she makes a final, desperate resolution. She softly explains that this will be her last attempt, for she has grown tired of running and will flee no longer. Turning back to her companions, she pleads with them to take the fallen Shiki and escape while they still can. The princess stares back in disbelief, unable to comprehend why the blacksmith would choose such a suicidal path. She questions the blacksmith's sanity, asking if she truly intends to face such a nightmare with a meager weapon in her hand. The response is a simple, unwavering affirmation. Raising the jagged, broken remains of a blade, the blacksmith reveals the harsh reality of her situation. The Delmeok has picked the surrounding mines clean, leaving her with no materials and no coin to forge anything better. This shattered steel is her final sword and her absolute last chance to reclaim her home. She stood firm, her resolve hardening like the steel she once forged. This was the moment of truth. Either the beast would fall, or she would meet her end right here on the battlefield. Seeing this desperate determination, her companion could only stare in stunned silence, the weight of the sacrifice beginning to sink in. Memories of everything she had lost flashed through her mind. The smoke rising from her ruined home, the vow she made over her mother's grave, and the trail of shattered blades that led her to this final, broken weapon. She had always been the one to stay behind, drawing the monster's ire so others could flee to safety. With a defiant cry, she lunged forward, the jagged remains of her sword gleaming with a lethal, desperate light. Even as she screamed for the others to escape, the princess stood her ground, refusing to abandon a comrade. She cursed her own perceived weakness, but knew she couldn't break the promise she had made to help. The young noblewoman braced herself, her massive weapon held ready as she declared that a true hunter never goes back on their word. Behind her, a familiar figure began to stir, drawing her surprised gaze. He rose to his feet, his spirit undampened by his injuries. With his blades drawn, he reminded them all that they were hunters, and a hunter's word was their bond, never to be cast aside like chaff in the wind. Relieved to see him awake, the blacksmith whispered his name, while the princess couldn't help but huff at his immediate return to bravado. She stands firm alongside her companions as the colossal Delmeok lets out a deafening roar that shakes the very earth beneath their feet. The realization hits them that conventional weaponry will not be enough to pierce the beast's hide, yet the young hunter on the right bellows a challenge, urging them forward into the fray despite the overwhelming odds. The blacksmith meets the monster's gaze with unwavering intensity, her expression hardening as she addresses her allies. She insists that their only hope for success lies in absolute mutual trust, before revealing that a strategy has already begun to take shape in her mind. The massive, feathered beast loomed over the trio, its screech echoing through the frozen landscape. Sakuya voiced her concern, noting that their standard weapons were proving ineffective against such a creature. Yet Shiki remained undeterred, urging them forward with a grin. She quickly formulated a plan, instructing her companions to keep the monster occupied for at least 30 minutes. While Shiki accepted the challenge with his usual bravado, Eri looked on in disbelief, questioning the sanity of such a request. Without another word, the blacksmith turned and sprinted away, leaving the two hunters to face the beast alone. Eri shouted after her, incredulous that they were expected to hold the line for half an hour, but Sakuya's only response was a desperate plea for them to trust her. The young warrior gripped her weapon tightly, cursing the absurdity of the situation as the monster prepared to strike. He lunged forward, his blades clashing against the creature's hard beak in a flurry of sparks and steel. The beast countered with a powerful sweep of its wings, the sheer force of the impact sending shockwaves through the air and catching the hunter off guard. With a deafening roar, the monster spun violently, its massive body becoming a whirlwind of feathers and fury. The blow struck true, hurling him backward across the rocky ground as the creature continued its relentless assault. He cries out in pain as the impact sends him tumbling through the dirt. Nearby, Eri watches with wide eyes, finally understanding the rhythm of the beast's movements. The massive, winged creature takes to the sky, its feathers rustling like dry leaves as it looms over the rocky terrain. Eri stands her ground below, dwarfed by the sheer scale of the predator. Stunned by its agility, the young hunter stares upward in disbelief. Eri warns him that in the air, the Serenidya has no equal, its mastery of flight making it a nightmare to track. He lunges forward with a desperate cry, his blades swinging wildly to catch the monster's attention. Eri realizes his intent. He is deliberately putting himself in harm's way to keep the beast's eyes off Sakuya while she works. The ground erupts in a shower of stone and dust as the creature strikes back with overwhelming force. Eri can only watch in horror, fearing that his reckless distraction might be his last. Battered and bruised, he struggles to find his footing amidst the debris. Eri rushes to his side, scolding him for his carelessness and asking if he's lost his mind, but he remains focused on the task at hand. He insists that they must rely on each other, his voice filled with a grim determination. He argues that Sakuya is doing her part, and they must do theirs by keeping the beast occupied, trusting in her plan despite the mounting danger. Suddenly, the monster rears back, its throat glowing as it prepares to unleash a spray of corrosive acid. Seeing the impending threat, he readies himself to unleash the power of the wind, hoping to counter the deadly strike. He braces himself as the beast's roar shakes the very air, its eye fixed on its prey with predatory intensity while the wind howls around them. Because of the sheer force of the monster's presence, the young hunter finds himself reeling, his grip tightening on the blades passed down from his master as a massive shockwave erupts behind him, threatening to tear the ground asunder. While the dust settles, he frantically searches the ground, realizing with a jolt of panic that he has lost his whetstone in the chaos, much to the annoyance of his companion who demands he focus on the battle at hand. Suddenly, the Serenidea unleashes a piercing, high-pitched shriek that echoes through the canyon, forcing the blonde warrior to clutch her head in agony as the sound waves batter her senses. The sonic blast is so powerful that it sends him tumbling through the air, his body spinning uncontrollably as he cries out in pain from the invisible force. Moments later, the momentum carries him into a pile of jagged rocks, the impact burying him under a mountain of debris and leaving him momentarily stunned. As she tries to claw her way out of the wreckage, she realizes they are both pinned down by the heavy stones, the situation turning dire as her companion remains trapped and vulnerable beneath the weight. Looking up, they see the monster's throat glowing as it prepares to deliver a final, acidic blow, leaving the young man to desperately call out for the missing stone that might be their only hope for survival. He and Eri are braced for the worst when a familiar voice cuts through the tension. Sakuya stands before them, a massive, newly forged weapon in her hands, apologizing for her delay as the Serenidea looms behind her. She explains that she utilized Delmeok's feathers and dragon bones found nearby to construct this makeshift tool. From their position amidst the rubble, the two hunters watch in awe as she prepares to engage the beast. The blacksmith reveals her creation to be a powerful crossbow, clicking it into place with a metallic snap. She confidently asserts that with a long-range weapon, the monster's deadly acid will no longer be a threat to them. As she prepares her aim, she muses on why such a simple solution hadn't occurred to her sooner, realizing that her habit of fighting alone had blinded her to the possibilities of support. Eri can only stare in disbelief at the blacksmith's ingenuity. With a determined look, she pulls the trigger, sending a volley of projectiles that explode against the Serenadea's hide. She declares with newfound conviction that they will succeed this time because they are finally fighting as a team. The explosions rock the massive creature, forcing it back as debris and smoke fill the air. Watching the tide turn, Eri feels the weight of the word team and the hope it brings to their desperate situation. He shouts from the ground, directing her to aim for the monster's throat where the skin is thinnest and most vulnerable. She quickly reloads, acknowledging his tactical insight as she prepares a precise follow-up shot to exploit the opening. The young man then calls out to his partner, signaling that it is her turn to strike while the beast is reeling. With a fierce cry, she leaps into the fray, swinging her massive weapon with renewed strength to deliver a crushing blow. She descends like a bolt of lightning, her massive weapon poised to strike as she bellows a command to charge. Below, her companions watch in awe, their spirits lifted by her sheer determination and the raw power of her assault. With a thunderous impact, the warrior's strike connects, shattering the ground and sending shockwaves through the air. Her allies can't contain their excitement as they witness the overwhelming force of the blow that finally brings the beast low. The massive beast is driven into the earth, disappearing beneath a mountain of stone and rising dust. The force of the collision echoes through the clearing, signaling the end of the creature's long and violent rampage. As the dust begins to clear, she stands over the crater, catching her breath while her friends look on with a mixture of relief and admiration. The heavy tension that gripped them moments ago starts to dissipate into the cool air. Silence falls over the battlefield, save for the settling of debris around the motionless form of their fallen foe. The threat that once seemed insurmountable has finally been quelled by their combined efforts. Seeing the victory secured, the blacksmith allows a genuine smile to cross her face, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting from her shoulders as she looks toward her companions. Approaching her companion, the princess offers a sincere apology for her previous harsh words, acknowledging the skill and bravery that led them to this moment. They share a quiet realization that they have truly succeeded in their hunt, having taken down the formidable Delmeok. While the others celebrate their hard-won triumph, the young hunter's attention is drawn to something shifting in the distance. Even as the blacksmith beams with gratitude, thanking everyone for their part in the victory. She stands frozen as the rock wall crumbles, revealing a hidden chamber that had been concealed for years. Eri observes that the collapse was inevitable, as the stone was merely a thin shell over a deep, hollow void. Within that dark hollow, the image of her father materializes, his body encased in a strange, translucent resin as he desperately reaches for a fragile sprout. The sight wrenches a cry of disbelief from her lips, his name echoing through the cavern. The young blacksmith can hardly breathe, her mind racing to understand how he could possibly be here, preserved in such a state. Beside her, Shiki and Eri are equally paralyzed by the impossible discovery, their eyes wide with shock. Driven by a mix of grief and confusion, she steps toward the remains of the wall, questioning why he would be in this place when he had abandoned her and her mother so long ago. Memories of his departure flood back, a time when he turned his back on his home, leaving only a command to wait and the image of a rare, glowing blossom. In the quiet of their old home, he had argued with her mother, insisting that a specific medicinal plant from the depths of the cave was the only hope for a cure. Despite her mother's desperate pleas that the mission was a suicide run, he urged her to lower her voice to avoid waking their sleeping daughter. His expression was one of grim resolve as he countered that no mercenary or guild hunter would ever truly risk their life for the sake of another's child. As the child slept soundly, unaware of the choice being made, he had asked who else would care for her future if not her own father, justifying the perilous journey that would eventually lead to his disappearance. She stands before the crystalline tomb, the echoes of the past finally clicking into place as the memory of his final words resurfaces, clear and painful. In that distant memory, her father had pleaded for her to have a future, insisting that his sacrifice remain a secret. He spoke of wanting her to live a full life, and begged her mother never to reveal the truth, fearing that the weight of his choice would fill her with a lifetime of guilt. His face, etched with a final, loving smile, urged her to recover quickly and be strong. The young girl's tears flowed freely as she cried out for him, a desperate plea for her father that would echo in her heart for years to come. Now, she kneels in the cold silence of the cave, offering a final report to the man who gave everything for her. She whispers that she is finally healthy, her voice steady despite the grief, while her companions stand back in respectful silence. It wasn't just her physical ailments that had been healed by his sacrifice, but her very spirit, forged anew by the truth of his love. The journey continues to a secluded workshop nestled among the trees. Near a small stream, the quiet of the wilderness is broken only by the soft splashing of water against bare feet. Sitting outside the rustic building, she shares the official story of her father's passing with her friends. She explains how the guild claimed it was a tragic accident involving experimental gunpowder, but she admits she never truly believed it, knowing he was far too skilled a hunter for such a simple mistake. As they rest, the young swordsman lies back, a new understanding dawning on him. He reflects on the master's behavior and finally realizes the true reason behind the decision to take on a pupil, seeing how the pieces of a legacy are finally falling into their rightful places. He listens as the blonde hunter reflects on the nature of parents, noting that while no father truly dislikes his children, love doesn't always prevent them from making irreversible mistakes. In response, the blacksmith quietly agrees, her gaze fixed on the ground as she absorbs the weight of those words. She continues, her voice tinged with a mix of sorrow and determination, explaining that her father lost the chance to see his dreams through to reality, leaving her as the only one capable of fulfilling his legacy. Breaking the somber mood, the young hunter suddenly hoists a pair of twin blades high above his head, marveling at how they feel entirely new and revitalized in his hands. Seeing his excitement, she explains that these are the wind swords, Urigan, which she has enhanced using materials salvaged from the Delmeos, noting the strange, shimmering elements she integrated into the steel. As he tests the weight of the dual blades, the princess draws her own weapon, curious about the modifications made to her longsword. The blacksmith reveals that she managed to acquire materials from a frozen keizu to forge the greedy cleaver, a longsword now imbued with a volatile element of lightning, causing sparks to dance along the edge. Despite her impressive work, she modestly suggests her father would have crafted something far superior, but the young hunter simply beams at her, declaring that he loves the weapon exactly as it is. He looks on in bewilderment as Sakuya unveils a peculiar wooden structure, her face beaming with pride as she announces a final surprise for the group. He tries to guess the purpose of the odd contraption, only for her to correct him with a playful grin, explaining it is an arbalesta, while the princess admits their shared ignorance of such complex machinery. She then adopts a gentle but firm expression, looking directly at them to make a heartfelt request. She wishes to join their traveling party. She is met with a boisterous shout of joy from the swordsman, who immediately hails her as his new master, even as the princess tries to temper his enthusiasm while reflecting on the somber memory of the graves left behind. He becomes even more excited upon hearing that she might lead them to an even greater mentor, as she reveals her knowledge of a legendary blacksmith whom her father once revered as a teacher. She looks down at the tools of her trade scattered across the workshop, speaking softly of her father's unfulfilled legacy and the difficult path she has chosen to walk. She declares her ultimate ambition with eyes sparkling with resolve, vowing to honor her father's memory by forging the world's most magnificent weapon from the rarest of materials. She is eager for the journey to begin, joined by a determined princess and a thrilled swordsman, all united by a shared sense of purpose as they prepare for their next great adventure. A massive, crab-like beast erupts from the earth, its hard shell glistening as it kicks up a storm of dust and debris. He stands his ground, a determined smirk playing on his lips despite the overwhelming size of his foe, his light hair ruffled by the wind of the creature's emergence. The battle intensifies as a powerful strike connects, sending a shockwave through the air and causing the monster to reel back amidst a cloud of smoke. As the dust begins to settle, he catches his breath, unaware that a dark silhouette is watching the confrontation from the shadows. A figure steps forward, a tall man draped in a tattered black cloak and wearing a chilling skull-like mask, questioning the youth's worthiness to be called swordsman. He speaks from beneath the shadows of his hood, offering a series of cold, technical critiques. He points out the flaws in the boy's stance, warning that failing to distribute weight properly in the sand will lead to a loss of balance, and insists the youth must overcome the bad habit of absorbing recoil only with his elbow. The moment of instruction is shattered as the giant crustacean lunges forward for a surprise attack, catching the young hunter completely off guard. In a flash of movement, the cloaked man intercedes, drawing a massive blade to effortlessly block the monster's crushing pincer, proving that his words were backed by immense power. He lashes out with a weapon that defies conventional design, its segmented blades whistling through the air as they find their mark. The warrior maneuvers the chain-link blade with terrifying precision, the metallic segments snapping together and apart in a fluid, lethal dance. Under the sheer force of his impact, the massive creature's shell shatters, its form collapsing into the desert's sand as dust billows around the site of its defeat. The beast lies broken as he stands amidst the settling haze, the strange weapon coiling back toward him like a serpent returning to its master. Observing the confusion of those around him, the stranger explains that his tool is a hybrid, a hunter's whip that bridges the gap between a sword and a projectile, though it lacks an official name in these lands. He watches as the wounded leader stares in disbelief, critiquing the man's performance and noting that it was far too early to rely on elemental abilities when his basic techniques were still so unrefined. While the prince struggles to process the critique, the enigmatic figure simply laughs at the questions regarding his identity, declaring himself to be the one who bestows true power upon hunters. He leans in toward the fallen prince, suggesting that they now share a common purpose, a burning desire for vengeance against the young hunter, Shiki. He leans forward, his face finally exposed to reveal a sharp, predatory grin that stretches across his features. His eyes glint with a dangerous intensity as he extends a hand, formally inviting the prince to join his cause. To punctuate the offer, he adds a mocking, almost playful remark about having treats to share, his voice dripping with a dark confidence. Shiki begins with a playful riddle, asking the group what they would call the person who taught his own master. As they trek through the lush tropical foliage, he wears a mischievous smirk, clearly enjoying the confusion he has caused. He bursts into boisterous laughter when the others finally give up, declaring that the answer is simple. He's the coolest guy in the entire world. The young swordsman, wielding his signature hurricane blades, argues that the man's greatness is undeniable, especially since even Sakuya's father referred to him as a teacher. Sakuya, carrying her righteous shot crossbow, confirms the man's legendary status, noting his specialized skill in crafting weapons for hunting the dangerous Myogurinu. She is interrupted by Eri, who adjusts her greedy cleaver and questions their current heading, expressing a weary hope that this workshop isn't much further away. The blacksmith offers a sheepish grin and a light-hearted laugh, confessing that she actually has no idea where he lives, only that his home is somewhere deep within the woods. Despite the uncertainty, they press on. She comments on the unique nature of Shiki's new blades while warning the group to remain vigilant against the predators lurking in the shadows. She watches as Shiki examines his twin blades, the hurricane. He marvels at the shimmering scales embedded in the metal, a testament to the existence of the Myogurinu his master spoke of. As they walk, Eri scoffs at his enthusiasm, telling him to keep dreaming. He is momentarily taken aback by her sharp tongue, while Sakuya notes the obvious and profound respect he holds for his mentor. The tension breaks as he happily tears into a massive hunk of roasted meat. Eri watches him with a mix of disbelief and annoyance, wondering what he and the meat could possibly have in common. Her annoyance boils over into a shout, but he only laughs, his carefree nature easily deflecting her frustration. Sakuya remains slightly apart, observing the pair's dynamic with a quiet curiosity. Shifting the conversation to more serious matters, she asks him if his master was also a marked hunter. He confirms this with a simple nod, his expression turning more focused. She finds this revelation puzzling, noting that it is strange for a hunter of that caliber to simply stop. She explains that hunting the Myogurinu is an officially sanctioned, lifelong pursuit, the very goal of their endless travels. Eri adds to the mystery, recalling that for as long as she can remember, they were always at home, never understanding why he chose to end his journey. He listens intently, the question of his master's retirement weighing on him. Suddenly, a spark of realization crosses his face as he remembers something. The others stop and turn toward him, sensing that he might finally have an answer to the mystery of why the great hunter laid down his blade. He spots something through the dense foliage, his eyes widening as he alerts the others to a presence ahead. In the clearing, a massive shape stirs, prompting him to wonder if they have finally encountered a beast. Suddenly, the jungle erupts with noise as a hulking, pink-furred creature crashes through the undergrowth. A frantic cry echoes through the trees, signaling that someone is already in the monster's path. The source of his shouting is a man in a wide-brimmed hat, sprinting desperately as the towering ape-like monster looms directly behind him. He bellows for assistance, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Despite his fear, the man halts for a fleeting moment, torn between self-preservation and his duty as a researcher. He frantically begins to sketch the beast, convinced that capturing its likeness is more important than his own safety. His dedication is short-lived as a powerful blow sends him tumbling through the air. From the safety of the nearby brush, the companions watch the chaos, with the princess identifying the creature as a Kongalala. Crashing into the dirt, the researcher finds himself cornered by the massive predator. He screams in a high-pitched panic, trying to convince himself he isn't afraid even as he cowers before the beast's gaping maw. He holds his finish, drawing aloft like a shield, declaring that his research must survive for the sake of future generations. Seeing the imminent danger, the girls realize they cannot simply stand by and watch him be devoured. Before the monster can strike, a shadow falls over it as the young swordsmen descend from the canopy with a powerful strike. Sakuya watches the intervention, her hand steady as the battle truly begins. He descends with a thunderous impact, his blades biting deep into the Kongalala's thick hide. The beast roars in pain and surprise as the force of the blow sends tremors through the jungle floor. Enraged by the sudden assault, the massive creature whirls around, its eyes bulging with fury. Before anyone can react, it crouches and releases a gargantuan, foul-smelling cloud of gas, catching the hunters completely off guard. The stench is unbearable, causing the group to gag and recoil in disgust. While the others struggle to breathe, the eccentric researcher leans into the cloud, frantically sniffing and declaring his need to document the potent biological sample, much to the horror of his companions. Seeing the distress of his new allies, the man quickly fumbles through his gear, pulling out a specialized canister. He confidently announces that he will neutralize the Kongalala's foul odor with a professional-grade deodorant. He hurls the device, but instead of a refreshing scent, a thick, blinding smoke screen erupts, further obscuring the battlefield. Realizing his mistake, he urges everyone to dive for cover in the nearby brush while Shiki, undeterred by the chaos, readies himself for a decisive strike. The young hunter launches himself into the air, spinning like a whirlwind as he descends upon the beast once more. With a fierce cry, he unleashes a powerful gust of wind with his blades, aiming to both strike the monster and clear the suffocating air. As a researcher watches in stunned silence, the sheer force of the maneuver creates a localized gale. The thick smoke and lingering stench are swept away in an instant, revealing the clear jungle air once more. While the immediate threat of the gas is gone, the wind carries the last of the odor directly toward Sakuya, who lets out a sharp sneeze of annoyance. Nearby, Eri offers a word of praise, relieved that the overwhelming stench has finally been dispersed. She brings her massive weapon down with a thunderous impact, the force shattering the ground beneath the beast. Shiki watches with a grin, certain that this final strike has sealed the monster's fate. The impact sent a shockwave through the clearing as the Kongalala is driven deep into the earth, its massive form finally collapsing under the weight of the assault. From the safety of the nearby brush, the researcher watches in awe, breathless, as he witnesses the raw power of the hunters. They regroup, and Eri examines her weapon, noting how the lightning element seems to have surged with newfound strength. Shiki agrees, feeling a similar resonance in his own gear, the energy of the hunt still thrumming through them. A young woman with long dark hair and a bright smile joins the conversation, her cheerful demeanor a sharp contrast to the recent violence of the battle. The jungle falls silent once more, the ancient trees standing tall over the scarred earth where the struggle took place. Amidst the foliage, the small details of the forest floor begin to settle, the ecosystem slowly recovering from the intrusion of the hunt as the group questions the researcher's origins. The researcher steps forward, adjusting his glasses as he formally introduces himself as Kark, a scientist from the Royal Paleontological Society of Naturalists, expressing his gratitude for their timely intervention. He adjusted his glasses. He went on to describe how reports had surfaced regarding new subspecies of the creature, distinguished by colors never before seen by their society, which prompted his current expedition. The young hunters listened with a mix of confusion and curiosity, struggling to grasp the scientific nuances of his explanation until the mention of the monster's name caused a brief, humorous misunderstanding. While the young woman with the dark bow expressed her amazement at the existence of such a dedicated organization, the researcher emphasized that the organic materials harvested from monsters were the lifeblood of human progress. He argued that their work was not just for academic curiosity, but a vital service that provided essential data to hunters across the globe, ensuring the survival and advancement of humanity. His expression turned more serious as he revealed a troubling trend. Monsters were becoming increasingly scarce in the regions surrounding the capital, to the point where some species could no longer be found at all. This shift in the ecosystem was a primary concern for his society, as it hinted at a larger, more mysterious change occurring within the natural world. This revelation struck the group like a physical blow, leaving them reeling in disbelief at the thought of the wilderness falling silent. The idea of a world where the great beasts no longer roamed was almost impossible for them to fathom, sparking a sudden and intense wave of concern among the young warriors. He maintained that without the delicate balance of the natural world, human civilization itself would struggle to survive, necessitating constant and vigilant observation of these shifting ecosystems. He explained that the disappearance of monsters wasn't just a loss for hunters, but a warning sign that the very foundation of their way of life was under threat. With a resolute smile, the man vowed that for the sake of future generations of hunters, he would never abandon his expeditions, no matter the danger. His eyes shone with a fierce determination, reflecting a deep-seated commitment to preserving the knowledge of the world for those who would come after him. They shared a moment of light-hearted camaraderie as the tension broke, with the young swordsman laughing and offering his sincere gratitude for the naturalist's unwavering dedication. The group's spirits lifted as they realized that even in the face of such daunting mysteries, there were those willing to dedicate their lives to finding the answers. He stands under the blazing sun as the group shares a light-hearted moment. Kark diligently records their words, noting that their meeting was like two solitudes coming together, while Eri playfully suggests he should focus on finishing his work instead of just writing down everything they say. The journey leads them to the sun-drenched streets of San Kaluga, a bustling desert city where the heat shimmers off the stone buildings and the air is thick with the scent of spices and dust. Inside a local tavern, the atmosphere is lively and crowded, filled with the boisterous laughter of travelers and the clinking of mugs as they seek refuge from the desert sun. At the bar, two figures sit in quiet contrast to the surrounding noise, their presence commanding a certain gravity amidst the casual revelry of the tavern. He demands answers, his voice sharp with impatience as he slams his metal-clad fist onto the wooden counter. Huron, known as the fire-breathing wood dragon, makes it clear he didn't come here to idle away time in pubs. He wants to know the secret to becoming marked. In response, his companion remains remarkably composed, staring into his drink while explaining that the path is both incredibly simple and impossibly difficult. He dismisses the other's irritation with a cool, detached air, even as he's addressed by a title he seems to find tiresome. The hunter's frustration boils over as he laments how Shiki has stripped him of everything, his prey, his honor, and even the girl he cared for. He feels a deep sense of loss, his pride wounded by the young swordsman's recent successes and the perceived theft of his destiny. Seeing his distress, the man with the long hair explains that to become one of the marked, one must pass a special examination held by the elders. He details how candidates are expected to demonstrate their hunting prowess under every conceivable condition, a trial meant to weed out all but the most worthy. He leans back, expressing doubt that most hunters truly believe in the existence of the Mayogaruna, suggesting they are more attracted to the prospect of hunting in any territory they please. Continuing his thought, he notes that in his guild, only Eri held onto the legend as truth, while he remains uncertain if the creature is anything more than a fairy tale. His gaze sharpens as he admits a desire for the sword Shiki carries, noting that while it is known to possess the wind element, even the guild remains ignorant of its true composition or origin. As a pair of small companions trot along a nearby railing, he questions Shiki's background, wondering if his extensive knowledge of weaponry stems from a connection to the blacksmith's union. He clarifies his proposition, suggesting that if Shiki assists him, there will be no need to resort to theft, especially since the sword's status will change once Shiki himself becomes marked. Pointing toward a distant, ornate tower, he explains the Starfall, an underground tournament reserved for elite hunters where the ultimate prize is the very weapon of one's defeated opponent. The young hunter reacts with visible shock to the brutal nature of the contest, but the swordsman confirms that only those wielding truly unique armaments are permitted to enter such a high-stakes arena. He finishes by stating that for those genuinely seeking the Mayogaruna, this treacherous path is the only one available, leaving his companion to weigh the weight of the choice before him. He emphasizes the stakes, explaining that the victor of the Starfall tournament receives the Starfall map, the only guide in existence to the lair of the legendary beast. He watches the boy's reaction closely, noting the heavy silence that follows such a monumental revelation. The young hunter remains stoic as the man continues, questioning if the sword is truly all that matters before advising that the boy must first earn the status of a marked hunter. He then observes that while they are currently useful to one another, he still knows nothing of the boy's identity, prompting a request for his own name in return. With a sharp, predatory grin, he offers a pseudonym, telling the boy to simply call him Shadow. His chosen title hangs in the air, repeated with a hint of suspicion as the boy tries to reconcile the name with the man standing before him. He turns his attention to the path ahead as they consult a map of the region, identifying the city of Gortet as their destination, a place where a mentor of the past once resided. The chart reveals an arduous trek through forests and over the Memure Mountains, leading the group to realize the journey to the coast will take several days of travel. He watches as the researcher prepares to depart, the man expressing his hope for a future meeting. As a gesture of thanks for his rescue, the traveler hands a map over to the girl, ensuring the group has a way forward. While a giant, buzzing insect drifts lazily past them, the group examines the gift. The young hunter is visibly stunned by the acquisition, though his companion remains doubtful that their eccentric new friend even knows the right direction. Suddenly struck by a realization, the researcher bolts toward the foliage, shouting that he almost forgot his task. He disappears into the brush with a frantic farewell, his mind already fixated on sketching the massive creature he just saw. He pauses for a brief second to call back one final thought, noting that the young hunter's twin swords are truly exceptional. The man admits he would love to learn more about them, but the call of discovery is too strong to ignore. From the edge of the clearing, the man delivers a parting warning that chills the air, telling them to beware of someone named Shadow. His voice carries through the trees as he continues his hurried retreat into the wilderness. The name lingers in the silence, prompting the two of them to exchange a look of pure confusion. The young hunter repeats the alias aloud, wondering who this mysterious figure could be. As the researcher vanishes completely, he stands still, pondering the cryptic message while his companions shout their goodbyes. The eccentric traveler is already long gone, chasing the wind in his next great sketch. Despite the unsettling warning, they decide to move on, acknowledging that the path ahead is far from short. With the map in hand and a new mystery to solve, the group prepares to continue their trek toward Gortet. As he stood there, the weight of the researcher's warning hung in the air, but it was his companion who seemed most affected. She looked on with wide, uncertain eyes, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her face as she whispered the name Shadow back to herself, the word tasting like a dark omen. The vast, rhythmic expanse of the ocean stretches toward the horizon, its waves churning under a heavy, cloud-filled sky. High above the restless waters, the sun breaks through the thick white veil, casting a brilliant, blinding light across the heavens. Amidst the shifting clouds, a trio of gulls glides effortlessly on the coastal breeze, their wings catching the morning light. Reaching the sandy shore, the young hunter cries out in pure exhilaration, his voice carrying over the sound of the surf as he celebrates their arrival at the sea. As the group continues their trek along the coast, he remains swept up in excitement, already dreaming of the massive shrimp he might catch, while his companions discuss their next destination. Sakuya reminds him that they must first reach the city of Gilthagard to find the master blacksmith, but the energetic youth is far more focused on the prospect of a seafood feast. While he remains preoccupied with his appetite, the blacksmith notices a lingering shadow in the blonde warrior's eyes and gently offers a listening ear should anything be weighing on her mind. The princess quickly brushes the concern aside, insisting that everything is perfectly fine, though her dismissive tone suggests otherwise. She reacts with immediate hostility when the blacksmith tries to call them a team, her expression hardening into a mask of cold defiance. She sharply rejects the notion, her sudden outburst leaving the others startled by the intensity of her denial. With the coastal city finally coming into view, she marches ahead, muttering her frustration at the need to constantly explain herself to the group. She maintains that they are merely individuals sharing a common path toward a single goal, stubbornly refusing to acknowledge the growing connection between them. She stands by the shore, watching as the ships succumb to the waves far sooner than expected. Memories of her first time at sea flood back, recalling the confusion and the watchful eyes of a girl from her past who wondered why she had even bothered to board. The weight of those memories lingers, casting a shadow over her face as she stares at the ground in silence. Her reverie is broken by the others, who remind her that the hunter's exam is fast approaching and they need to be ready. Clutching her pen, she focuses on her goal, knowing that passing this trial is the only way to become a marked hunter and finally fulfill the dream her father left behind. The conversation shifts to more practical matters as they gather around a table. They need 30,000 zenny to reach the elders, prompting a proposal to hunt for the legendary Mayoguruna together. While the others are eager to join forces, she remains defensive, snapping back when a suggestion is made to sell her precious collection to fund their journey. Sensing her internal struggle, the young hunter reaches out and firmly takes her hand, insisting that they face the path ahead as a team. He smiles warmly at his companion, reminding her that as comrades, they will always be there to lend a hand. Eri raises her arm in a gesture of solidarity, the bond between them strengthening as they prepare for the next leg of their journey. In response to his kindness, she beams with a radiant smile, declaring that they are the best friends anyone could ask for and expressing her genuine affection for the group in a rare moment of vulnerability. However, the joyful mood evaporates instantly as she erupts in a fit of rage, her face contorted with frustration upon learning that a ship is unavailable, shouting her disbelief at the sky. Gesturing toward the harbor of Linkarinka, she points out a large, multi-masted vessel docked at the pier, questioning why they cannot simply use the ship that is clearly sitting right there in plain sight. A local woman chuckles at their predicament, finding their confusion amusing before explaining the grim reality. No ships are permitted to leave the port because a white plesiath has been sighted in the nearby waters, making any voyage a suicide mission. The news leaves the young hunters stunned, with Shiki and Sakuya exchanging looks of disbelief as they struggle to understand how such a creature, typically found in freshwater or leading squads of water lizards, could be haunting these specific shores. The local officials continue their discussion, noting the oddity of the situation given the creature's usual habitat and the specific conditions of the local environment that should have kept it away. He steps forward to clarify, explaining that the low salt concentration in these waters makes such sightings rare, though not impossible, while Shiki listens with a mix of confusion and concern about the implications for their journey. He chuckled heartily, his voice echoing through the room as he reiterated that no vessel would be leaving the harbor as long as the plesiath remained in the local waters. Sakuya's expression darkened at the news, while Shiki and Eri recoiled in disbelief, realizing the gravity of their predicament. She leaned in with a mischievous glint in her eye, suggesting that the solution was quite simple. One merely had to dodge the beast's attacks with perfect timing. She warned them that a single strike from such a creature would render any armor useless, prompting Eri to conclude that the only logical path forward was to eliminate the threat entirely. He smirked, his eyes narrowing with approval as he admitted those were exactly the words he had been hoping to hear. The sudden shift in his demeanor caught the young hunters off guard, their initial shock turning into wary curiosity. He produced a formal document, revealing that a request to hunt the monster had already been filed by a local ship captain. The parchment was covered in official seals and intricate script, detailing the bounty placed upon the aquatic terror. He explained that because so many hunters frequented their port, the client was offering a unique incentive. The group would be granted passage across the sea absolutely free of charge upon the monster's defeat. Eri, ever practical, immediately inquired about the specifics of the payment. She cheered at the prospect of a free voyage, her eyes sparkling with excitement at the thought of saving their funds. Sakuya remained more grounded, pointing out that regardless of the reward, no ship could physically depart until the plesiath was dealt with. He looked towards Sakuya, asking if she was truly prepared for what was to come before mentioning a final, peculiar condition attached to the contract. Eri watched him closely, sensing that the catch might be more than they bargained for. They stared in utter horror as he unveiled the mandatory attire for the mission. Skimpy, Kelby-themed swimwear that left very little to the imagination. The absurdity of the requirement left the trio speechless, their faces contorted in a mix of shock and pure embarrassment. She bristles with indignation, her voice rising in a sharp protest against the absurd demand. The official merely chuckles, finding her outrage amusing as he leans back, clearly enjoying the leverage he holds over the stranded group. He continues his explanation, revealing that the client is a retired hunter with a peculiar sense of pride. He refuses to let anyone on his vessel unless they prove themselves to be more impressive than he once was. It is a test of character as much as skill, albeit a humiliating one. The gravity of the situation begins to sink in as they weigh the risks of facing a massive beast without the protection of their usual gear. While the young swordsman focuses on his meal, his companions argue that a single strike from such a monster would be fatal without proper armor, though the official insists that the secret lies entirely in one's ability to dodge. Suddenly, the boy declares his acceptance of the terms, catching everyone off guard with his impulsive decision. The port official beams with relief, noting that the ridiculous requirement had scared off every other hunter, leaving them as the only ones brave or foolish enough to try. He flashes a confident grin, his eyes burning with a familiar, reckless determination. To him, the outfit is a small price to pay, for he firmly believes that as long as they stand together, they're the most formidable team in the world and no challenge is insurmountable. This sudden burst of idealism leaves the captain speechless, his mouth agape at the youth's unwavering spirit. While the women nearby find the display charming and agree to the terms, the blonde warrior can only sigh, realizing she has been outvoted and is now committed to the plan. The official stares in a daze, struggling to process the boy's intense energy and perhaps questioning his own sanity. The young hunter snaps back, his patience wearing thin as he demands to know what the man is staring at. Soon after, the group finds themselves aboard the ship, though the reality of their new attire is far more revealing than they had anticipated. While the blonde hunter tries to put on a brave face and focus on the mission, her companion is paralyzed by shame, hiding her face as the port official offers unsolicited and overly personal compliments on their appearance. She watched in silent mortification as her companion stood at the ship's railing, bellowing at the open sea. He seemed entirely unbothered by the tight, revealing Kelby-style gear they were forced to wear, shouting for his master with a lung-bursting enthusiasm that made her want to disappear. As he continued his exuberant praise for the blue sky and the vast ocean, she and the blacksmith could only exchange weary glances. The boy's energy was boundless, his shouts echoing across the deck while they stood huddled in their embarrassing attire, wishing for a moment of quiet. The noise finally drew unwanted attention, prompting a sharp reprimand from a nearby figure. Fed up with the spectacle, she delivered a swift, corrective blow to the back of the shouter's head, demanding to know what he was thinking while he babbled nonsense about the color of the sky. Nearby, a tall, muscular hunter reclined against the ship's rigging, his brow furrowed in deep irritation. He had been attempting to rest, but the constant clamor from the group made the deck feel more like a crowded marketplace than a vessel bound for a dangerous hunt. He stood up to confront the noisy youth, eyeing the boy's peculiar outfit with a mix of disdain and confusion. The young hunter, undeterred by the man's imposing presence, immediately fired back a comment about the stranger's own choice of clothing, sparking a tense standoff between the two. The veteran hunter sighed, explaining that he had specifically told the client he would handle the mission solo, only to find himself sharing the deck with these amateurs. Behind them, the girls realized with a start that they had all been deceived by the same quest giver, lured into this humiliating situation under false pretenses. Upon hearing that the stranger was also targeting the plesiath, the boy's eyes lit up with sudden realization. Instead of seeing a rival, he saw a potential ally, his previous annoyance vanishing in an instant as he processed the shared objective of their journey. With a wide, infectious grin, he declared that since they shared the same goal, they were now officially a team. The stoic hunter could only stare in disbelief, caught off guard by the boy's relentless optimism and the sudden, unwanted expansion of his hunting party. He enthusiastically announces to his companions that they have found a fourth member for their group. Beside him, the blacksmith with the eye patch watches as the muscular man they just met reacts with indignation. The man roars, demanding to know what team he's talking about, and taking offense at being compared to a gorilla. The muscular hunter leans in, his face contorted with annoyance as he insists that he can handle the hunt solo and that the others would only be a hindrance. In response, the young swordsman remains undeterred, pointing out the simple fact that they are all pursuing the same target, the plesiath. Supporting this logic, the blacksmith adjusts her position, her expression calm as she reasons that Shiki is correct. She notes that facing such a challenge would be significantly easier with 4 hunters working together rather than one. As the vessel begins its journey, the muscular man's voice booms across the deck, ordering the others to stay back and insisting he wants nothing to do with them. Despite the hostile reception, the newcomers maintain their composure, calling out their introductions as Sakuya and Shikiryu while the shoreline begins to recede. Now gathered on the moving ship, the mohawked hunter continues to protest their presence. He argues that simply having a common goal doesn't make them a cohesive unit, looking down at his unwanted companions with a stubborn scowl. His rant is interrupted when the blonde girl with the twin tails steps into view, her expression icy. She bluntly sides with the muscular man, making it clear that she has no desire to cooperate with any of them, effectively shutting down any hope of immediate camaraderie. This cold dismissal leaves the group in a heavy silence. The muscular man is visibly surprised by her bluntness, while the young swordsman watches her closely, his usual energy replaced by a thoughtful, serious gaze as he weighs her words. Sensing the underlying tension, the blacksmith leans toward Shiki and notes that the girl's aversion to the idea of a team seems deeply rooted. Even as they stand together on the deck, the group remains fractured, with the muscular hunter grumbling about their inability to get along before the hunt has even truly begun. He addresses Grell as they stand on the deck, observing the friction within their small group. He suggests that Aries' refusal to cooperate isn't mere stubbornness, but likely stems from specific, painful reason hidden in her past. As the ship cuts through the rolling waves of the open sea, the vast horizon offers no answers to the growing silence between the hunters. She recoils internally at the very mention of comrades, the word triggering a flood of bitter memories. She recalls the mocking faces of former associates who laughed at her, their betrayal still stinging like a fresh wound. This resentment traces back to a day in the city, when she was walking alone through the stone-paved streets and heard her name called out from a balcony above. She was confronted by a veteran hunter who expressed mock sympathy, claiming he had heard from her supposed partners that she had completely botched a Gypsero's hunt. She stood frozen, confused by the blatant lie being spread about her performance. Confused, she insisted that she had successfully completed the request on her own, but the veteran remained skeptical, questioning how such a discrepancy in stories could even exist. The truth came to light moments later when her teammates approached her near the massive, fallen carcass of the Gypsyros. With smug grins, they admitted they had been keeping her in the dark about their true intentions until they had secured a significant profit. One of them explained their scheme with cold indifference, detailing how they exploited the guild's rules to hoard materials and pay her a pittance. He boasted about a quick way to earn money that relied entirely on deceiving their own teammates. She stands amidst her companions as they lay out a deceitful plan. They suggest that by reporting the quest as a failure to the guild, they can keep the harvested materials and sell them for a massive profit, bypassing the official distribution rules. Because of the secrecy of the black market, they assure her that their betrayal will never come to light. Despite their confidence, she remains visibly shaken, stammering that such an act is strictly against the law and the hunter's code. In response to her hesitation, the leader leans in with a predatory grin, explaining that they've found a buyer, a man known as Shadow, who is willing to pay exorbitant prices for materials to develop new weaponry. As they gather around a table littered with maps and coins, the group continues to pressure her, claiming this is all for her benefit and that the wealth they gain will solve all their problems. She can only wring her hands in distress, pleading with them to reconsider this dishonest path. The three men loom over her, their expressions hardening as she continues to struggle with her conscience. She tries to explain her discomfort, but her voice is small against their collective will and the cold logic of their greed. Sensing her wavering, they remind her of their bond as a team, their voices turning cold and accusatory. One of them pointedly asks if she intends to betray her own comrades by reporting them to the authorities. Overwhelmed by the weight of their expectations and the fear of isolation, she finally bows her head in submission. With a hollow voice, she accepts their terms, her spirit breaking under the pressure of their collective coercion. This memory of past coercion fades as the present reality asserts itself before the grand facade of the guild hall. A voice rings out across the plaza, announcing the names of the hunters selected for the mission that would change everything, including her own. She stands with her back to the world, facing the high tribunal of the Hunters Guild. The charges are read aloud: poaching and the deliberate falsification of quest reports. The weight of the accusations hangs heavy in the grand hall, beneath the emblem of the dragon. Beside her, the members of the Hellhounds are visibly shaken, their confidence replaced by cold sweat. The leader of the group, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief, whispers a question, asking if she was the one who turned them in. She remains calm, acknowledging their bond as a team, which only fuels his rage. He snaps, his face contorted as he accuses her of selling out her own comrades to save herself. The heated exchange is cut short by the sharp crack of a gavel. A stern official towers over them, demanding silence and order within the court as the proceedings continue. Ignoring the outburst, she continues her testimony with a hollow gaze, concluding that because they acted as one, they must all share the burden of guilt. This final admission sends the leader into a frenzy. He lunges toward her, his eyes wide with manic fury as he screams insults, branding her a traitor and a snitch. She flinches, the venom in his words striking deeper than any physical blow. Because of her confession, the guards move in, seizing the three men and dragging them toward the cells. Their screams of hatred and blame echo through the chamber, leaving a trail of bitter resentment in their wake. Now left in the sudden, oppressive silence of the hall, she stands alone. A voice calls out her name, Ari Jesker, pulling her focus toward the high bench where her fate still awaits. She stands small and bowed before the high official, who reminds her that a single incident has cost her everything. He questions if she truly intended to compete for the title of a marked hunter, his voice heavy with the weight of her failure. Because of her actions, the magistrate delivers the final, crushing verdict. From this moment forward, she is strictly forbidden from participating in the current examination. She stands frozen as the decree is finalized, the path to her goals suddenly severed. Later, she finds herself at the edge of the docks, staring blankly at the horizon as the reality of her isolation sinks in. The quiet of the port offers no comfort to her troubled mind. Suddenly, the calm surface of the water begins to churn, spiraling into a violent, localized whirlpool. Noticing the sudden disturbance, she turns her head, her eyes widening in alarm as a strange, rhythmic sound echoes from the depths. Before she can react, the water explodes upward, a massive shape breaching the surface with terrifying force. A colossal plesiath lunges from the sea, its massive, fish-like body crashing onto the wooden pier. She stands dwarfed by the creature, which towers over the crates and the very ship docked nearby, its presence marked as a high-level threat. Stunned by the sudden appearance of the beast, she watches as it snaps its jaws, its wet scales glistening in the light. Despite the shock, her instincts begin to take over as she prepares for the inevitable confrontation. The water erupts with a violent force, sending a massive spray into the air as something colossal breaches the surface of the harbor. She stands frozen on the pier as the creature looms, while her companion screams her name in a desperate attempt to snap her out of her shock. Suddenly, a hand grips her arm. Shiki has arrived, hauling her back from the edge while reminding her with a roar that they are in the middle of a hunt and she needs to focus. The force of the monster's movement sends him tumbling backward, his grip slipping as he lets out a startled cry, leaving her momentarily vulnerable on the splintering wood. They both hit the deck hard as the very foundation of the dock begins to groan and shatter under the immense pressure of the aquatic beast. From the sidelines, their friend watches in horror, calling out their names as the pier is completely obliterated by a crushing blow from the depths. Amidst the wreckage and the churning foam, the massive, toothy maw of the plesiath rises directly before her, its jaws unhinged and ready to strike. It looms over her, a wall of scales and predatory hunger, as she stares into the dark abyss of its throat, the reality of the hunt finally sinking in. She is frozen in the face of the beast, but Shiki lunges forward from the safety of a nearby vessel, his arm outstretched in a desperate plea. He bellows for her to grab hold, his eyes wide with the urgency of the moment. He balances precariously on the edge of the small boat, still reaching out across the churning water, while she remains stranded on the splintering remains of the dock, the waves threatening to pull her under. She hesitates despite the immediate danger, her gaze hardening as pride flickers in her eyes. Shiki offers a reassuring smile, urging her to trust him, but she recoils, shouting for him to stay away and declaring that she will manage on her own. With a defiant glare, she turns back toward the looming threat of the plesiath, refusing the offered lifeline. The monster's massive tail slams into the water with a deafening roar, sending a wall of spray into the air and nearly capsizing the small boat. Shiki screams her name in terror, fearing the worst, but as the mist clears, she stands firm on the bobbing wood. Gripping her blade, she mutters a bitter vow, declaring that she no longer believes in the concept of comrades. Watching the unfolding chaos from a safe vantage point on the shore, the prince observes the struggle with a cold, calculating amusement. A dark smirk plays across his lips as he chuckles softly, seemingly satisfied by the desperate scene playing out in the harbor. The massive sea beast erupts from the depths, its scaled hide glistening as it towers over the small vessel. Shiki reaches out instinctively, his face etched with terror as the creature looms over them. As its powerful tail churns the water into a violent froth, Ares steels herself, whispering that she can handle this. Her resolve is met by Shiki's desperate cry, his voice cracking as he screams her name across the turbulent waves. Standing precariously on a fragment of drifting wood, she raises her weapon, prepared to face the monster alone. Below her, the dark-haired girl watches the spray, shouting that she will provide cover for the desperate stand. The trio is gripped by a sudden, chilling realization as the situation spirals out of control. Their eyes widen in shared horror, the gravity of the monster's power finally sinking in as the water begins to surge once more. With a thunderous crash, the beast's tail obliterates the wreckage, sending Ares spiraling into the air. She cries out in pain and shock as her footing vanishes, leaving her airborne and vulnerable above the churning sea. Watching from the safety of the ship, the prince observes the chaos, noting that Shiki was wise to discard his heavy armor before diving in. He realizes that while the boy is defenseless against such a titan, it was the only way to reach Aerie in time, though their survival now hangs by a thread. Nearby, the muscular hunter with the top knot raises a massive horn to his lips, letting out a deep, resonating blast that echoes across the water. The girl beside him watches in disbelief, questioning if a mere sound could possibly save them from the impending slaughter. The effect is immediate as the creature's eyes glaze over, its massive head lolling as the sonic vibration dazes its senses. It begins to sink back into the depths, neutralized by the unexpected frequency of the hunter's horn. She stares in disbelief as the massive creature remains motionless in the water, wondering what could have possibly caused such a sudden change. Above her on the deck, the warrior with the top knot lowers a strange horn, remarking on her ignorance of the tool. He explains that the sound it emits is specifically designed to lull monsters into a deep, albeit temporary, slumber. Realizing the opportunity, she prepares to move, but the hunter quickly warns her that the effect won't last. The beast could stir at any moment, and the horn's power is a one-time advantage they cannot afford to waste. The ship sits precariously close to the drifting, unconscious Leviathan, the silence of the sea masking the imminent danger. Having climbed back aboard, the young hunter beams with excitement, declaring the stranger a great man and insisting he become their fourth companion. The warrior, however, is far from amused, demanding the boy stop his incessant chatter while the youth sighs in relief that they didn't end up at the bottom of the ocean. He continues his enthusiastic pitch, suggesting that their combined strength would make them unstoppable. The stoic warrior remains focused on the threat, reminding them that the creature will wake soon and they need a plan to finish it off rather than making introductions. Finally, the man turns his back, offering only his name, Gordon. Nearby, the blonde huntress rests, recovering from the ordeal as the boy's playful antics continue to grate on Gordon's nerves, especially when the youth refers to him as their pet gorilla. While he and the others are dealt with elsewhere, the focus remains on the wounded. Gordon looks down at the unconscious princess, noting with a gruff relief that she was lucky and her wound isn't as severe as it looks. The warrior remains silent, his gaze lingering on her peaceful, sleeping face as she recovers from the ordeal. Meanwhile, the rest of the group finds themselves confined behind the cold iron bars of a guild-holding cell. They shout in protest, outraged to learn they've been sentenced to a month of imprisonment. They question why the girl who led them here is standing freely on the other side, accusing her of being an informant while they suffer the consequences of their shared actions. He grits his teeth in frustration, listening as she explains the fallout of her actions. She reveals that despite her confession, she hasn't been granted immunity. Instead, she's been barred from participating in the prestigious swordbearer tournament, a punishment that seems to weigh heavily on her despite her calm exterior. Despite the grim circumstances and the bars between them, she offers a soft, genuine smile. She tells them that meeting them was the best thing that happened to her, calling them her best friends, and promises to wait for their release so they can start their journey together from the very beginning. Suddenly, the tender moment shatters when she leans in and spits toward him, catching him completely off guard with the unexpected insult. He explodes in a fit of rage, screaming for the girl to get out of his sight and never return. He roars for her to leave as she simply sticks her tongue out in a final act of defiance, turning her back on him and walking away. As she disappears into the distance, he turns back to his companions with a boisterous laugh. He tries to find the humor in their situation, even as he laments the fact that their plans to hunt the legendary Myogaruna together have been put on hold for the next month. Ares stands defiant as two men jeer at her, their faces twisted in mocking laughter. They dismiss her conviction, claiming the legend of the Myogaruna is nothing more than a fairy tale that no sensible person believes in. One of them leans in close, taunting her with the cruel assertion that she lacks the potential to ever become one of the marked. She snaps back, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and hurt as she insists the creature is real because her father told her so. The men only sneer further, branding her father a liar to her face. Though she tells them they can insult her all they want, she refuses to let them disparage the memory and honor of the man who raised her. The sharp tolling of a bell suddenly cuts through the argument, signaling the end of visiting hours and forcing a bitter conclusion to the confrontation. She flees in tears, crying out that people like them could never understand her father's heart or his truth. Moments later, the memory of the past dissolves into a harsh present as she finds herself on the deck of a ship, startled by a violent tremor in the water. They are gathered on the deck, the weight of their situation pressing down on them as Gordon grimly notes that this is their final opportunity to succeed. He warns that the plesiath is regaining its strength and will soon be upon them. As the tension mounts, she winces, clutching her bandaged arm as a sharp pang of pain shoots through her, drawing Shiki's concerned gaze. Because of the sudden disturbance, a massive, finned beast erupts from the depths, towering over their vessel with terrifying grace. The plesiath has arrived, its scales glistening with seawater as it looms over the deck. Shiki rushes to her side, urging her to stay still and not aggravate her injuries while the rest of the crew prepares for the inevitable clash. The monster strikes, its sheer mass sending a violent shudder through the hull as it lashes out at the ship. Water sprays everywhere, and the vessel groans under the assault, threatening to splinter apart. Gordon realizes with a curse that the boat won't withstand much more of this punishment, even as Shiki is nearly thrown off his feet by the impact. In response to the looming disaster, the muscular hunter reaches for a massive, ornate instrument strapped to his back. He heaves the heavy horn into a ready position, his expression shifting from grim determination to a strange sort of focus. Shiki watches in utter bewilderment as the man declares that the time for music has finally come. He begins to play, the deep, resonant tones of the horn cutting through the roar of the waves and the monster's cries. The mysterious girl looks on, her eyes wide with disbelief at the sight of a hunter performing a melody in the heat of battle. Ethereal musical notes seem to drift through the air, signaling the start of a very different kind of hunt. He continues to play the hunting horn, the resonant notes vibrating through the air and into the very souls of his companions. Shiki stares at his trembling hands in disbelief, feeling an unnatural heat coursing through his veins as the music stimulates his mind and bolsters his physical strength. Eri watches in awe, realizing the true power of the instrument as the melody weaves a spell of heightened aggression and focus over the group, explaining that the sounds are designed to influence the psyche and temporarily boost one's combat prowess. As the horn rests momentarily on the wooden deck, the lingering magic takes full hold of the young hunter. He lets out a primal roar, his eyes wide with the sudden, overwhelming surge of adrenaline and raw power that the melody has awakened within him. Fueled by this newfound vigor, he launches himself into the air, his body becoming a whirlwind of steel as he spins toward their aquatic foe, determined to unleash a devastating assault. The strike connects with force, sending a massive spray of water and scales into the air as the impact rattles the ship. Seeing the opening created by the assault, the mohawked hunter lowers his instrument and turns his attention to the girl. He questions if she is finally ready to join the fray, to which she responds with a confident, sharp laugh, her spirit undaunted by the monster's size. He offers a knowing smirk, acknowledging her professional resolve as she drops into a low, predatory crouch. She scoffs at the idea of being left behind, her eyes fixed on the target with lethal intent, ready to prove her worth as a hunter and demanding to know who he thinks he's talking to. Meanwhile, the young swordsman remains in the thick of the struggle, his expression hardening as he prepares for the next exchange. In response to the relentless pressure, the massive beast breaches the surface once more, its jaws agape in a silent, terrifying display of prehistoric fury. Eri lunges with her massive weapon, her cry echoing across the deck as Gordon urges her on. Below them, the plesiath thrashes violently, its massive form churning the sea into a frothing mess as it nears the vessel. Suddenly, the beast's head breaks the surface with a terrifying roar, its jaws snapping. The force of the movement throws her to the deck, her ankle twisting painfully. Seeing the danger, the mohawked hunter screams for her to retreat immediately before the monster can strike again. Heedless of his warning, the creature lashes out with its enormous tail, a sweeping blow that shatters wooden crates like kindling and sends a spray of debris across the docks. As the secondary impact of the water and debris threatens to overwhelm the fallen huntress, Shiki throws himself into the path of the blast. His sudden intervention leaves her, Gordon, and the young girl watching from the sidelines in a state of absolute shock. She immediately begins to berate him, her voice shrill with panic as she questions his sanity for taking such a reckless blow head-on. The impact of the water is immense, a crushing force that would have surely broken a lesser man. Despite the heavy blow, he remains upright, though drenched and clearly shaken. She continues to scold him, insisting that his sacrifice was unnecessary, but he simply grins through the pain, dismissing the drenching as nothing more than a bit of water. His expression softens into one of grim determination as he explains his reasoning. It didn't matter if it was dangerous. His only thought was to protect his comrade. This simple admission leaves her speechless, her eyes wide as she processes the depth of his loyalty. Meanwhile, he clenches his fist, his frustration with the beast growing as he prepares for the next round of the fight. She watches as he stands tall, his voice ringing out with conviction. He declares that a true hunter protects their comrades above all else, regardless of the cost. As his words echo, the dock beneath them shatters under the weight of the beast's assault. Gordon watches in alarm as the structure gives way, realizing that if they fall into the water now, they will surely become prey for the monster. Ignoring the crumbling wood, he lunges forward through the spray, his arm outstretched toward the edge of the collapsing platform. With desperate intensity, he bellows for her to grab hold of him before she slips away. She stares at him, momentarily frozen by the sheer sincerity in his eyes. The simplicity of his resolve is baffling to her, a stark contrast to the complex world she knows, yet it leaves her completely at a loss for words. Finally, she reaches out, her fingers locking around his as they dangle precariously over the churning waves. The wood groans and snaps around them, but his grip remains unshakable. While they struggle to regain their footing, the massive creature thrashes nearby, only to find itself ensnared in the heavy rigging of the wrecked ships. Seeing the beast struggle against the ropes, Gordon roars that the moment they've been waiting for has arrived. They quickly scramble back to a stable footing, their eyes fixed on the trapped monster. Shiki signals his readiness, and as the mysterious girl prepares her next move, she gives the command to strike. With a coordinated surge of energy, the hunters launch a final, desperate offensive against the flailing plesiath. The air fills with the sound of clashing steel, and the beast's pained cries as they pour everything they have into the assault. He stands amidst the wreckage as the dust finally settles over the harbor. The once turbulent waters have calmed, reflecting the soft light of a sky no longer choked by the chaos of battle. Nearby, the massive form of the plesiath lies motionless against the shattered remains of the docks. The beast that once terrorized the port is now nothing more than a mountain of scales and fins, hopelessly entangled in the very nets and rigging it tried to tear apart. Seeing their formidable foe finally vanquished, the young hunter erupts in a jubilant shout, throwing his arms wide in triumph. He declares the mission a success, his voice ringing out with the news that the sea route to Gortet is finally clear, while his companions share in the hard-won relief. Turning his attention to the stoic warrior who aided them, he eagerly suggests that they all travel together, pointing toward the vessel that will take them to their next destination. The girl beside him adds that their success has earned them a free passage, a reward for securing the safety of the port. They gather before the colossal carcass, the sheer scale of the creature becoming even more apparent in the stillness of the aftermath. The mohawked hunter gazes at the prize, acknowledging the impressive nature of the catch they have secured from the depths. A calculating glint enters the veteran's eyes as he leans in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. He asks the group if they have any interest in earning a bit of extra coin, his expression shifting from one of a comrade to that of a man with a hidden agenda. He lays out a deceptive scheme, suggesting they report the mission as a failure to the guild while secretly selling the valuable monster parts on the black market for a fortune. While he argues that everyone would benefit from the illicit profit, the young woman stares at him in mounting disbelief and disgust. Before he can finish his pitch, she silences him with a sharp, stinging blow to the face. Her voice trembles with indignation as she warns him never to suggest turning her team into a band of common criminals. She stands her ground, her voice ringing with conviction as she declares that a true hunter would never stoop to such illegal dealings. The man with the mohawk remains silent for a moment, the sting of her rejection, and perhaps her hand, still fresh on his cheek. He quickly tries to laugh it off, claiming it was all just a joke to test them, while the others watch the exchange with varying degrees of suspicion and confusion. Unmoved by his excuses, she stares him down with cold, unwavering eyes, making it clear that the subject is permanently closed and she will hear no more of it. Seeing that he cannot sway her, he finally relents, gesturing toward the massive carcass on the shore and telling them the beast is theirs to handle as they see fit. When a young woman with the bow in her hair questions their change in plans, wondering why they aren't heading to Tortet as originally intended, he simply replies that they are going home. A small, almost genuine smile touches his lips as he admits that, in the end, he really just wanted the thrill of the hunt. With a boisterous laugh, he turns and begins to trek across the sandy beach, leaving the group behind to ponder his strange nature while the girl laments the loss of a potential bonus. He has departed, leaving the young hunters to their own devices, but his presence still lingers in their conversation. Shiki is caught completely off guard when Eri refers to them as a team, his eyes widening in surprise. She immediately recoils, her face flushing as she frantically denies ever saying such a thing, while Shiki remains fixated on the unexpected admission. The bickering is suddenly cut short by a blinding flash of light and a chorus of boisterous voices. Amidst the laughter and shouting, Eri's frustration boils over as she demands to be put down, her voice nearly drowned out by the chaotic energy of the moment. Far from the docks, the sun beats down on the imposing stone pillars of the guild's central headquarters. The grand, classical architecture stands as a silent witness to the shifting tides of the region's politics and the official business being conducted within. Inside the hallowed halls, beneath a banner bearing a coiled dragon, a stern voice breaks the silence. The speaker questions whether the errors of the past have truly been accounted for, and if the council can be certain that such failures will not be repeated. Standing alone in the center of the vast, circular chamber, Gordon faces the High Council. He remains composed, his posture radiating the confidence of a man delivering a critical report to his superiors. He explains that, according to his findings, Eri Jesker had no hand in the recent incident. A faint, knowing smile touches his lips as he remarks that she is currently in the company of reliable allies, far from the trouble she once caused. With a formal salute, he declares his full support for her continued journey alongside the marked hunter. He is certain that she will not repeat her previous mistakes, placing his own reputation behind the success of their mission. High above on the dais, the guild judge listens intently before finally nodding in agreement. He accepts the report and thanks the hunter for his testimony, signaling that for now, the matter is settled and the group's path is clear. He watched them depart, his thoughts lingering on the weight of their journey. Perhaps, he mused, these were the ones destined to breathe life into legends long dismissed as mere fairy tales, as the vast, untamed wilderness stretched out before them. An ancient legend has long been whispered among the people, passed down through generations like a sacred secret. It speaks of a colossal, shining dragon that appears in the clear night sky, its brilliance so intense that it eclipses every other star, plunging the world into a chaotic twilight as it destroys everything in its path. This celestial beast brings agony to the earth and the heavens alike, consuming the very light of the cosmos until only a single, lonely spark remains in the dark void. the last star. The young hunter's eyes widened as the weight of the story settled in, realizing with a jolt of excitement that this legendary last star was the very creature they were destined to find. He looked toward his mentor, noting how the guild's ambitious plan to form a specialized unit for this hunt seemed to perfectly mirror the man's own bold and reckless nature. The veteran explained that these chosen hunters would bear a unique mark, a symbol of authority that allowed them to track their quarry across any territory, bypassing the usual restrictions of local guild borders. As they sat in the quiet of the workshop, the boy questioned the true significance of such a mark, pointing out that most hunters remained bound to their local guilds and the familiar lands they were sworn to protect. His master smiled grimly, clarifying that no map or official contract could lead them to Myogaruna. Only those willing to wander the world without end, driven by an unyielding spirit, would ever stand a chance of finding it. He explains that the seal serves as a sort of passport, a necessary tool for reaching lands that lie far beyond the jurisdiction of a local guild. Hearing this, the young boy enthusiastically claims to understand everything, but the veteran hunter simply sighs. He remarks that these are complex adult matters, perhaps still a bit too early for a child to fully comprehend. Despite the boy's confusion, the master reveals a startling truth. He possesses the authority to bestow that very mark upon his pupil. Overjoyed, the youth leaps into the air, shouting that his teacher is truly the greatest in the world. A soft smile touches the man's face as he looks at his ward. He encourages the boy to grow up quickly, urging him to refine his mastery so he can become a true hunter of monsters. The boy falls silent for a moment, his expression turning uncharacteristically serious as a thought takes hold. Sensing the shift in mood, the master looks over, his brow furrowing in anticipation of whatever question is brewing in the young mind. The child finally speaks, questioning why, if his master is indeed one of the marked, they aren't out traveling the world right now. The man's reaction is immediate and prickly. He snaps back, asking why the boy is being so difficult when he expected him to be thrilled by the news. He continues his bluster, shouting for the boy to hurry up and grow, so he stops being such a nuisance underfoot. After all, he grumbles, who else is going to put in the work to turn a brat like him into a real hunter? He turns his back on the young hunter, walking away with a heavy silence, leaving Shiki to stammer out a frantic apology and a hasty wish for a good night as he retreats. The veteran warrior's expression remains stoic, his gaze fixed forward as if burdened by thoughts he cannot share. Suddenly, the boy jolts upright with a piercing cry, the words of his dream still echoing in the waking world as the carriage he occupies rattles along a dusty path, pulled by a steady, reptilian beast of burden. His sudden outburst startles his companions, who look on with a mix of amusement and exasperation. The woman beside him chuckles, noting that only he could wake up by screaming a bedtime greeting, especially since the rest of the world has long since begun its morning. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he realizes the intense conversation with his master was nothing more than a vivid memory playing out in his sleep. He mutters a quiet thanks for the man's hidden kindness, even as his friends tease him, suggesting his shouting was born of a deep affection for his mentor, a topic he is quick to dismiss with a flustered groan. As the sun climbs higher, the carriage crests a hill, revealing a sprawling vista of the lands ahead. They have almost reached Gortetta, and the prospect of meeting his father's former mentor fills the young hunter with a renewed sense of purpose and anticipation. The city of Gortetta reveals itself as a bustling hub of industry, famous throughout the region for its numerous weapon workshops and skilled artisans. It is a place where the ring of hammers on anvils serves as the heartbeat of the streets, and word is spread that even the elite hellhounds have returned to its gates. Upon reaching a specific workshop, the group disembarks amidst the scent of hot metal and coal. While his companion wrinkles her nose at the pungent odor of the forge, Shiki leads the way, calling out for the master of the workshop, an old man known as Kabarian, hoping to find the answers he seeks. Sakuya steps into the quiet workshop, her eyes searching the familiar tools and benches for any sign of her grandfather. She wonders aloud if the old man has wandered off somewhere again, leaving the forge cold. She senses a strange presence, just as Shiki's ears perk up at a low, rhythmic rumbling. Outside, the air begins to vibrate with an unnatural energy, drawing their attention toward the courtyard. Suddenly, a violent blast tears through the peace of the workshop grounds, sending a massive plume of dust and debris skyward. The high official and Aerie are caught completely off guard, their conversation silenced by the sudden roar of destruction. They stand frozen in place, eyes wide and jaws dropped in sheer disbelief at the scale of the eruption. A heavy shield, reinforced with the toughest materials, is shredded like paper by a concentrated burst of fire and pressure. Sakuya can only watch in horror as the smoke billows from the impact site, realizing the sheer power of what has just been unleashed. From above, the courtyard is swallowed by a massive white cloud, marking the epicenter of the catastrophic test. Out of the haze emerges an elderly man, his face lit with a manic, triumphant grin as he cackles with delight. He declares that the project is finally complete, his eyes gleaming with the pride of craftsman who has achieved the impossible. He stands before a towering, mechanical monstrosity, a dragon-slaying cannon of immense proportions. He boasts that this is the strongest version in the world, a weapon so devastating that even a shield made from Rathian hide could not withstand its might. He looks up in shock as the group approaches his workshop. Shiki waves enthusiastically, calling out to the old smith, while Eri and Sakuya follow close behind, relieved to see that both the old man and his workshop survived the recent chaos. The old man lets out a boisterous cry of recognition, his wide grin revealing a missing tooth as he adjusts the goggles on his forehead. He can hardly believe his eyes, wondering aloud if the young woman standing before him is truly Sakuya. She beams at him, her expression full of affection as she asks after his well-being. Taking in her appearance, he gestures toward her new attire, questioning if she has finally taken up the mantle of a hunter. She confirms his suspicion with a proud nod, standing tall in her gear. Nearby, a small pig rests undisturbed, its rhythmic snoring the only sound in a moment of quiet peace amidst the bustling workshop. The smith erupts into a fit of laughter, finding the tale of their journey to be an incredible saga. While he revels in the story, Eri interjects, reminding the group that their need for a more formidable weapon is what brought them here. Looking around at the crates and equipment scattered across the yard, he admits that while he'd like to help, his focus has been entirely consumed by his work on the massive cannon. In response, she draws her blade, the metal gleaming as she prepares to show him the mysterious mark of the Myogaruna, certain that its presence will capture his professional interest. She watches as the old master smith's eyes widen in shock upon seeing the blades. He immediately recognizes them as the legendary wind swords, questioning if she is certain that he is the one they truly need to consult. He leans in closer, his goggles reflecting the metallic sheen as he scrutinizes the craftsmanship. Mumbling to himself in disbelief, he confirms the authenticity of the weapons, his initial shock turning into intense curiosity. He erupts into a boisterous laugh that fills the workshop, declaring his absolute fascination with such magnificent blades. The sight of the wind swords has clearly ignited a fire within the old smith. She modestly explains that she only made minor adjustments to the weapons and admits she hasn't yet been able to draw out the full power of the materials. Intrigued, the master asks who originally forged them, wondering if it was her father or perhaps Sakuya herself. He shifts his gaze toward the young hunter, asking if it's true that someone is actually putting these legendary blades to use in the field. He seems skeptical that anyone could master such volatile weapons. He steps forward with a confident grin, confirming that he is the one wielding them. He proudly reveals that the swords were a gift from his teacher, the man who trained him in the art of the hunt. This revelation causes a stir among the group as he clarifies that his mentor was none other than Grell. Eri is visibly stunned, her eyes widening as she hears her father's name linked to Shiki's training. He reacts to the name Grell with a thoughtful, knowing expression, though he remains somewhat cryptic. While the others are caught up in the surprise, the old smith seems to be weighing the significance of this connection. He reflects on the past, noting that although he and Grell only crossed paths once a century ago, the man left an indelible impression as a truly magnificent hunter. He finds himself invigorated by the exchange, while Shiki enthusiastically confirms that his master was indeed the greatest in the world, a sentiment that Eri listens to in quiet contemplation. His pride is met with a sudden demand from the master smith, who insists they hand over their weapons and gear, announcing that the coming days will be entirely devoted to the legendary wind swords. The trio responds with overwhelming gratitude, their faces lighting up at the prospect of their equipment being handled by such a legendary craftsman. However, he quickly tempers their joy with a stern reminder. As hunters, the responsibility of gathering the rare materials required for his work falls solely on their shoulders. They accept the challenge without hesitation, their voices rising in a chorus of agreement that sends the old smith into a fit of boisterous laughter. Soon after, the group finds themselves in the frozen wilds, where Shiki hauls a massive crystal while a ferocious, white-furred beast bellows a challenge at them. While the others face the elements, Sakuya meticulously searches the depths of a cavern for ore as the smith begins his preparations back at the forge. He reflects on the path the young hunter has taken, remembering the simpler moments of their journey, like when Sakuya would energetically swing a net through the tall grass to catch insects. He often struggled with the basics of survival, once even flailing helplessly in a river after falling in while trying to fish, much to the amusement of his companions on the shore. Moments later, the levity of those memories fades as the reality of their dangerous life returns, recalling a time they stood together against a towering, tusked beast in a jagged canyon. Amidst the clash, the young hunter lunges forward with fierce determination, his dual blades becoming a blur of motion as he strikes at the monster's thick hide. This struggle was a testament to the legacy he carries, a path forged by a mentor who is truly unique among his kind. Back in the present, the master smith observes him with a toothy, knowing grin, remarking that the youth has finally become a marked hunter, even if it took quite some time. He lets out a boisterous laugh, teasing the boy about how he didn't even want to travel at first, while the hunter grumbles for the old man to stop rubbing salt in the wound. His expression then shifts to one of solemnity as he explains that he is selective about his work, for he does not enjoy crafting weapons for just anyone who asks. He stands by as the leader of the hellhounds adjusts his heavy gauntlet with a metallic click. The tall man sighs, a look of weary resignation crossing his handsome features as he prepares to divulge a long-held truth. He leans in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he addresses the elderly blacksmith. He makes a solemn request, asking the old man to promise that the secret he is about to share will be carried with him to the grave. In response to this revelation, the master smith's eyes widen in pure disbelief as he stares at the mark on the man's wrist. It is the symbol of a high-ranking hunter, yet something about it seems fundamentally wrong to the veteran craftsman. Ignoring the old man's shock, he admits the startling truth. He is not actually one of the marked. As the blacksmith erupts in a fit of vocal disbelief, the swordsman explains that without the true status, his ability to travel and operate as he once did is severely limited. Standing tall amidst the confusion, he clarifies that while he successfully passed the grueling trials required for the title, he chose to pass the actual honor and the mark itself to someone else. He insists that the mark he currently bears is merely a facade, a necessary deception to maintain his standing while he guides the next generation. He offers a small, knowing smile, explaining that his primary motivation was to avoid crushing the young hunter's spirit. He wants the boy, Shiki, to believe in the weight of the mark's status, even if the man he looks up to is playing a part. Looking out over the rugged landscape where the others wait, he reveals that even the guild officials were eventually persuaded to go along with this elaborate ruse. He felt it was better to keep the full complexity of the situation hidden from the boy for the time being. His expression softens with a rare moment of genuine conviction as he looks directly at the smith. He asserts that if the old man had seen the fire and determination in the boy's eyes, he would understand exactly why such a sacrifice and deception were necessary. He stares in disbelief, his mind reeling from the revelation. He wonders what kind of boy could possibly inspire such a sacrifice from a hunter as legendary as the one standing before him, finding it hard to fathom that the path to greatness was yielded so willingly. Outside, the quiet of the evening is shattered by a boisterous cheer erupting from the local tavern, celebrating a successful day's work. Inside the warm glow of the establishment, the young hunters are in high spirits. Shiki laughs heartily, boasting about how well they handled their recent hunt, while the others enjoy a well-earned feast. They discuss their coordination and the effectiveness of their tactics during the encounter. As the celebration continues, the princess turns her attention to a parchment, meticulously checking off the items they have managed to secure for their ultimate goal. She notes that they are nearly finished, with only one final, elusive component remaining on their list: the hide of a creature known as the Hakugru. She explains that this specific material is vital for the next stage of their preparations. This name causes the blacksmith to pause, a look of genuine confusion crossing her face. She admits that in all her years of studying rare beasts and materials, she has never once encountered a mention of such a creature. The princess clarifies that it is an exceptionally rare find, a creature of legend that few have ever laid eyes upon, let alone successfully hunted. Far from the warmth of the tavern, amidst the biting winds of the frozen peaks, the creature itself stirs, a massive, predatory shadow prowling through the snow, unaware that it is now the target of a new generation of hunters. High in the frozen peaks, the legendary beast finally reveals itself, its massive silhouette cutting through the driving snow. With a jagged maw open to the elements, it lets out a silent, bone-chilling roar that echoes across the desolate mountainside. The frozen peaks of Canron stretch across the horizon, a desolate landscape defined by ice and biting winds. Within this biting wilderness, the snow-covered coniferous forests inspire a primal terror, even in the hardy creatures that call them home. Yet, amidst the freezing gales, a single predator prowls the surroundings in search of prey, utterly indifferent to the lethal drop in temperature. This legendary beast is known as the Ice Claw, Haku-Agru, a creature of shadow and frost that haunts the mountain passes. Far from the legends, the young hunter is currently faring much worse, his teeth chattering uncontrollably as he cries out for his master in the sub-zero temperatures. Seeing his pathetic state, she offers him a warming concoction, telling him to shut up and drink it while Sakuya keeps watch with her lantern. The drink is a specialized tincture designed to warm the body even in the most severe frost. As they trudge through the deep drifts, he continues to complain about the stinging sensation of the spicy drink and even tries to grab her cloak for warmth, but she dismisses his whining, explaining that the oast grass is necessary for survival here. He then turns his attention to their mission, asking Sakuya if she has ever heard of the Haku-Agru, but she admits that even in the guild of Gortetta, the beast is a mystery, and even a master Smith Kabarian had remained silent on the matter. She watches as Eri declares with unwavering confidence that no matter how terrifying the monster might be, they will surely overcome it. Shiki and Sakuya exchange a look, surprised by her sudden bravado and a shift in her attitude toward their mission. Looking at the princess's back, she realizes that Eri hasn't even noticed how much she has begun to truly trust in their team, moving past her initial arrogance to find strength in their shared goal. The princess continues her enthusiastic rally, pointing out that once they defeat the beast, they will obtain first-class weapons. She agrees, noting that they will certainly have to give it their all to succeed. However, the moment of inspiration is cut short by Shiki's violent shivering, prompting her to snap at him to stop being so weak and just take his medicine already, as his constant complaining is starting to grate on her nerves. Without warning, a massive shelf of snow collapses from the heights above, burying the young hunter in a freezing white deluge. As the dust settles, she and the princess cry out in alarm, finding him half-buried and stammering through blue lips about the unbearable temperature. Her eyes suddenly dart upward to the ridge, sensing a presence, just as a dark, menacing shape emerges from the swirling mist above the snowbank. The legendary beast, Haku Aguru, finally reveals itself, lunging down from the precipice with predatory grace and terrifying speed. The beast lunges with terrifying speed, forcing the hunters to scramble. Eri barely has time to register its velocity as it closes the distance in a blur, its movements far more fluid than its massive size would suggest. It stands before them now in its full, lethal glory, the Haku Aguru. This predator, marked with a 4-star danger rating, possesses a leopard-spotted hide and powerful, scaled limbs built for the treacherous mountain terrain. Facing the creature, Eri questions if this is truly just a leopard, but Shiki, gripping his blade tightly, confirms that this is indeed the legendary Haku Aguru they were warned about. Sakuya stands ready beside them, her eyes fixed on the threat. Its predatory gaze fixes on them, eyes burning with a cold, calculating hunger. Every muscle in the beast's face is taut, revealing a row of jagged teeth as it prepares for its next move. In response, the three hunters steel their nerves. Eri, Sakuya, and Shiki each share a moment of silent resolve, their expressions hardening as they realize the sheer scale of the challenge before them. Suddenly, the beast pounces again, its massive form crashing through the snow with a guttural snarl. Eri cries out a warning to her companions as the predator's shadow looms over them. She swings her heavy weapon with a desperate roar, but the creature is like a phantom, dodging the blow with impossible agility. Shiki watches in shock as the beast evades the strike, realizing that their opponent is faster than anything they have ever faced. Having evaded the initial counterattack, the predator leaps high into the frozen air. It hangs suspended for a heartbeat against the gray sky, positioning itself for a devastating strike from above that threatens to crush the hunters below. It descends with cataclysmic force, shattering the frozen ground into 1,000 jagged shards. The hunters scramble as the very earth beneath them splinters, the air filling with the sharp crack of ice and the roar of the impact. Amidst the flying debris, she lunges forward, her massive weapon swinging in a desperate arc. But the beast is a blur, evading her strike with impossible grace and leaving her to stare in disbelief at the empty space where it once stood. They are thrown into a frantic dance of survival, barely dodging the creature's lightning-fast movements. Every gasp and grunt of exertion echoes through the frigid air as they struggle to find their footing against an opponent that defies their every move. The predator finally comes to a halt, its spotted hide stark against the white expanse of the mountain. From a distance, the hunters look small and vulnerable, mere specks in the shadow of the legendary beast's power. Catching their breath, she admits the grim reality. The creature is simply too fast to land a clean hit. He can only grit his teeth in frustration, cursing their inability to pin down the phantom-like monster. Despite the overwhelming odds, his eyes burn with a renewed fire. He declares with grim determination that the true battle has only just begun, refusing to let the beast's speed break his spirit. Far from the frozen peaks, a quiet workshop stands nestled among the trees. The air here is still, a sharp contrast to the chaotic blizzard of the mountain heights. Inside, she is hard at work, the rhythmic strike of her hammer against the anvil echoing through the room. Each blow is precise, a testament to her craft as she forges ahead, unaware of the life-and-death struggle unfolding elsewhere. The researcher is stunned, unable to fathom how a hunter of such caliber could abandon his lifelong ambition for the sake of a mere boy. He wonders what kind of person this youth could possibly be to inspire such a sacrifice from a man of his standing. He watches as the veteran hunter smiles, clarifying that he hasn't abandoned his dream at all, but rather entrusted it to another. Looking back on his journey, the man recalls his childhood desire to become a legendary hunter, believing that slaying a Myogaran would grant him that title. His memories drift to the rugged mountain ranges where he once participated in a defensive tournament to earn the rank of the Marked. It was during those grueling trials, deep within the peaks, that he first crossed paths with the boy who would change everything. Reflecting on that encounter, he admits that he eventually came to a profound realization. The simple desire to become a legend is never enough on its own to sustain a hunter's path. With a knowing look, he explains the core of his philosophy. Legends are not born of solo ambition, but are forged by the faith of those who believe in them. Far from these quiet reflections, the boy in question hurtles through the air with a defiant cry, his body a blur of motion as he descends toward the battlefield. Below him, the icy beast moves with terrifying grace, its speed turning the terrain into a flurry of snow and debris. Watching the spectacle from the sidelines, the princess and her companion are gripped by disbelief, never having witnessed a creature capable of such blinding acceleration. She shouts a warning, frustrated by the reckless approach of her ally. Despite his best efforts, the young hunter finds himself struggling to keep pace, his strikes meeting only empty air as the monster dances out of reach. He realizes with growing dread that victory is impossible if he cannot even manage to graze his opponent. He shouts with renewed vigor, urging his companion to hold on and promising that together they will find a way to overcome the beast, refusing to let despair take hold. In response to his bravado, the creature lets out a terrifying snarl, its massive fangs bared in a display of raw power that leaves the princess frozen in disbelief. The beast then lunges forward with predatory grace, its scaled body a blur as it closes the distance in a single, powerful bound. Despite the danger, the young hunter laughs, managing to intercept the monster's strike with a sickening crunch as he claims to have finally caught his prey. His reckless maneuver leaves his partner aghast, as she realizes that the slightest misstep against those enormous fangs would result in him being torn to pieces, questioning if he has truly lost his mind. The struggle intensifies as the beast retaliates, sending the warrior tumbling down a steep, snowy incline while his ally screams out in desperation. As he falls through the air, battered and bruised, he roars his defiance, refusing to let the crushing weight of the situation break his spirit. The world becomes a chaotic whirl of motion as a massive, sweeping force clears the area, leaving the outcome of the desperate clash hanging in the balance. The veteran hunter has completed his trial, but the weather is turning foul. He realizes he must return to the city immediately, as the wind begins to howl with the force of a typhoon. As the gale intensifies, he struggles to maintain his footing. The sheer power of the wind is unnatural, and he begins to worry that finding the path back will be impossible in this blinding storm. Suddenly, he freezes, his senses alert. He detects a presence nearby, an aura so distinct and powerful that it cuts through the chaos of the storm, leaving him questioning who could possibly be out here. The landscape around him is a blur of swirling dust and debris as the tempest reaches a fever pitch, masking everything in a gray shroud of wind. Through the roar of the wind, he hears the distinct sound of footsteps approaching. His hand goes to his weapon, sensing something formidable, yet he realizes with a start that this energy doesn't feel like any monster he has ever encountered. Out of the haze, a young boy with wild, spiky hair appears, looking remarkably unfazed by the elements. The child asks what he is doing there, prompting a wave of shock to wash over the veteran hunter, who cannot believe a lone child is wandering this wasteland. He stares in disbelief as the boy claims the monster-infested territory as his home. When the child explains that his village was destroyed long ago, leaving him to survive here alone, the hunter can only wonder if the boy has lost his mind. Despite the man's skepticism, the boy just laughs, boasting of his strength as a hunter. He proudly displays his catch, treating the deadly environment as nothing more than his personal larder. He stands there, a small child clutching a juvenile herbivore as if it were a mere prize, offering to share the meager catch with the stunned veteran. Grell can hardly believe his eyes. The boy has managed to hunt a creature, however small, in this desolate wasteland where survival is a constant struggle. While the boy beams with pride over his first successful hunt, Grell's mind races with the sheer impossibility of the situation. He suddenly freezes, a cold dread washing over him as he realizes the boy is completely oblivious to the lethal nature of the storm that has followed him. Emerging from the heart of the tempest is a nightmare of steel and wind, the legendary Kushaladora. The elder dragon descends, its metallic scales shimmering as it whips the air into a lethal vortex, dwarfing the small camp and turning the sky into a chaotic swirl of debris. He stares up at the beast, his voice trembling as he identifies the dragon that no hunter has ever managed to conquer. The sheer scale of the creature's power is suffocating, a force of nature made flesh and metal that defies everything he knows about hunting. Forcing himself to breathe, Grell tries to steady his nerves, knowing that panic will only lead to a swift death. He watches the dragon through the swirling debris, desperately trying to find the resolve to face a monster of such terrifying proportions. The beast lets out a deafening roar that shakes the very earth, its jagged maw open wide in a display of absolute dominance. Despite the terror clawing at his chest, a spark of desperate ambition flickers within Grell. He realizes that defeating this god of the storm is his only chance to achieve true fame. He urges himself to be brave, recalling every trial and every monster he overcame to earn his place in the qualifying tournament. Yet his body betrays him, his leg trembling uncontrollably as he desperately commands his muscles to move and stand his ground. High above, the steel dragon spreads its massive wings, becoming a silhouette of doom against the churning sky. The wind howls with renewed fury, signaling the beginning of a struggle for survival against an unstoppable force of nature. The beast's presence is overwhelming, yet the young boy charges forward without hesitation. Grell watches, paralyzed, realizing that if the boy survives this, he will truly become a legend. He begs the boy to take him along, to let him share in that destiny. He doesn't show a hint of fear, instead leaping into the air with a joyful shout of pure excitement. The veteran hunter can only stare in bewilderment, wondering what could possibly be going through the child's head as he treats a life-or-death encounter like a game. He sprints through the gale-force winds with an unnatural grace, moving as if the storm itself were guiding him. It seems impossible that anyone could navigate such a violent vortex so freely, yet he dances through the gusts without losing his footing. He continues his reckless advance, prompting Grell to scream for him to return before it's too late. However, the veteran hunter stops mid-shout, noticing something incredible. The boy isn't just running. He is reading the very currents of the wind, seeing a path where others see only chaos. He points a defiant finger at the metallic titan, his eyes burning with a fierce, unwavering resolve. With a voice that cuts through the howling storm, he vows that he will grow strong enough to slay the beast one day, demanding that the dragon remember his face until that moment arrives. He leaves Grell completely stunned with such audacity, his mouth hanging open in a silent gasp of disbelief. The sheer scale of the boy's ambition, voiced in the face of certain death, is more than the older man can process. He watches as the massive, scaled head of the dragon looms over the tiny, grinning human. There is a terrifying contrast between the ancient, cold malice of the elder dragon and the vibrant, fearless joy radiating from the boy. The boy's actions defy all logic, forcing Grell to a singular, haunting conclusion. In his mind, there are only two possibilities. Either the child is a complete fool who doesn't understand death, or he is a madman who actively seeks it out by challenging a god. He watches as the steel dragon ascends, the sheer force of its wings creating a localized hurricane that tosses the small boy into the air like a leaf. The massive creature departs, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The boy simply laughs, pointing a finger at the departing beast and mocking its apparent retreat as if it were a frightened animal. The veteran hunter, however, is paralyzed by the realization that the elder dragon didn't even consider them worth its attention, viewing them as nothing more than insignificant insects. The veteran hunter remains frozen as the gale subsides into a sudden, eerie calm, unable to comprehend how the child can find joy in such a brush with death. Shiki's smile is pure and untroubled, his eyes bright with the thrill of the encounter. He seizes the boy with a sudden, desperate intensity, staring into Shiki's eyes with a mixture of awe and absolute certainty. In this moment, he realizes he is looking at someone destined for greatness, the only one capable of transcending the limits of ordinary hunters to become a true legend. Meanwhile, far from that mountain peak, Eri trudges through the deep snow of a dense forest, her voice echoing through the trees as she frantically searches for any sign of her missing companion. Her partner follows closely, his expression grim as they navigate the treacherous terrain. She stops in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat as she stumbles upon a sight of pure nightmare. A massive, scaled limb resting amidst the shattered timber. The sheer scale of the creature is staggering, casting a long shadow over the snowy ground. She plunges through the thicket, ignoring the potential danger as her desperation mounts, her screams for Shiki growing more frequent and strained. The sound of snapping branches fills the air as she forces her way toward the fallen beast. She brushes aside the warnings from her companions that the beast might still be moving, her only focus being the safety of the boy she fears is lost. Her eyes are wide with a mix of terror and determination as she approaches the massive, silent form. She stands frozen as the massive silhouette emerges from the tree-line. The monster she had feared was a threat is instead being hoisted aloft like a trophy. Beneath the weight of the leopard-spotted beast, the young hunter grins, his face smeared with blood but his spirit unbroken. He declares the mission complete with a triumphant roar that echoes through the clearing. Nearby, the young girl watches in tearful awe, unable to believe the sight before her. As he adjusts the heavy, warm hide on his shoulders, he marvels at the creature's heat, seemingly unfazed by the sheer impossibility of his feat. The two young women admire their newly forged equipment, testing the weight and fit of the armor. One notes the surprising durability of the plates, while the other marvels at the intricate design of her blade, which feels more powerful than ever. They turn to the master smith with glowing praise, calling his craftsmanship truly first class. He remains humble, waving off the compliments, and insisting he simply did his best with the materials they brought him. He continues his explanation, noting that the relationship between a hunter and a smith is one of mutual necessity. While he provides the skill to shape the gear, it is the hunter who braves the wilds to secure the rare components that make such quality possible. His words resonate with them, and he punctuates the thought by declaring that everything in their world is bound together in a grand cycle. The girls can only agree with the old master's profound perspective. As the conversation shifts, the smith admits he is anxious to see how the young man will react to his latest creation. However, a shadow of worry crosses the blonde hunter's face as she reminds him that their companion has remained in a deep slumber for 7 days, recovering from his heavy wounds. A sudden, violent gust of wind tears through the workshop, accompanied by a sharp, whistling sound that cuts through their talk. They all spin toward the entrance, eyes wide with surprise at the sudden disturbance. They step toward the opening, squinting against the air. The master smith mutters in confusion, while the others realize the wind is coming from the training grounds outside. There, the young warrior has finally awakened, standing amidst a swirling vortex of air as he tests the incredible power of his new weapon. He has awakened far sooner than anyone anticipated, catching the master smith and the two young women completely off guard. The warrior's sudden movement triggers a violent cyclone that erupts from the center of the forge, the sheer force of the wind nearly knocking the elderly smith off his feet. He grips the hilts of his new twin blades with all his might, his muscles straining against the raw, turbulent energy they emit as he realizes the power within the steel is far greater than he can currently master. Observing the struggle, the master smith remains calm, noting that such a reaction was to be expected given the exceptional nature of the weapons he forged. Despite the initial difficulty, the young man soon stands tall in his new, ornate armor, his spirit undampened as he declares his readiness to face the legendary Mayoguruna, while his companions offer a mix of encouragement and pragmatic warnings about his current state. He is met with a sobering warning from the master smith, who acknowledges their improved equipment, but points out that no one has ever successfully hunted the beast they seek. Suddenly, a memory flickers in the old man's mind, a tale once told by a traveling merchant that might hold the key to their quest. His thoughts turn toward the distant labyrinth of the ancients, a place rumored to house the celestial fragments they seek. The elderly smith leans over a crate, explaining his theory that the star shards might lead them to Mairuna, the legendary last star. Shiki and Eri react with shock, the concept of a labyrinth and star shards sparking immediate intrigue. As the group huddles together, Shiki eagerly asks for the location of this mysterious place. Sakuya supports the old man's reasoning, suggesting that these shards might not just be clues, but actual physical pieces of Mayoguruna that they must investigate. He then reveals a weathered map, pointing to a distant region far to the north. There, hidden from the world, lies the underground castle of the ancients. This place, once the proud bastion of a vast empire, has long since crumbled into forgotten, subterranean ruins. Countless seekers of fortune have perished in their search for it, lured by whispers of the ancients' immeasurable wealth and their strange, lost inventions. However, the site is not merely a tomb of gold. It is a treacherous maze from which few have ever returned, earning it the name of the labyrinth. It stands as a silent, enigmatic monument to a bygone era, the mysterious palace of the ancients. Despite the warnings, Shiki is ready to charge ahead, though Eri remains wary of the danger. Sakuya points out the practical benefit. Any treasure found would fund their long journey, but the old smith quickly tells them to hold their horses. He continues his grim warning, explaining that the brave souls who dare to hunt in those ruins faced a fate worse than failure, as the palace ruins have become a nesting ground for monsters. He delivers the final blow to their optimism. None of those hunters ever returned, leaving Sakuya wide-eyed in shock. The reason for these disappearances is whispered in dark corners. Rumors speak of a terrifying zombie dragon, known as Gurkuza, a skeletal beast said to guard its subterranean domain with a jealous ferocity, suffering no intruders. Because of this looming threat and the labyrinth's reputation for possessing an incomprehensible, ancient power, the guild assembly officially forbade any hunting within the labyrinth of the ancients, sealing the overgrown entrance to protect the living. Despite the forbidden nature of the ruins, which leaves the girls questioning the guild's authority to block their path, the young hunter reacts with his usual boisterous energy, lunging forward to pull the elderly smith into a rough embrace. With a grin that defies the gravity of the situation, the young hunter declares his resolve, certain that if a clue to Mayoguruna exists within those forbidden walls, they are the ones destined to uncover it. The young man's confidence is met with a look of pure dread from the old smith, who stares back with sweat beading on his brow as he tries to instill a sense of reality, reminding the youth that the place is a graveyard for every hunter who has ever stepped inside. His desperate pleas fall on deaf ears as the boy simply reveals the swirling mark upon his arm, dismissing the past failures of others and asserting that their arrival changes everything. They are ready to begin the hunt. He raises a fist high, his voice booming with a declaration that they will face the dragon Gurkuza to ensure their journey continues. This display of bravado catches the old master smith off guard, his eyes widening behind his goggles. He watches as the young women share in this confidence. The blacksmith notes they are equipped with the finest gear, while the princess dreams of the treasures awaiting them in the ruins. Seeing their fire, the elderly man breaks into a wide, toothy grin, acknowledging the spirit of these young hunters. He urges them not to linger with an old man and to set out immediately, his well wishes following them as they cheer and depart toward the horizon. The seasons turn, and nearly 6 months pass since that spirited departure from the smithy. Following this passage of time, within a grand hall, the leader of the hellhounds stands before his men, the atmosphere heavy as news of Kiran's departure from Okamaya settles over the group. As the weight of these changes settles over the hall, a solitary flame flickers atop a stone pillar, serving as a silent testament to their resolve and a beacon for the path ahead. The guild judge, his bird-like mask lending him a stern air, questions the candidate's resolve. He asks if the man is truly prepared to cast aside his former life and commit himself entirely to the pursuit of the elusive last star. Standing before him, the young man with the sharp, light-colored hair gives his solemn oath. With a firm voice, he accepts the weight of the commitment, ready to leave his past behind. The ceremony reaches its peak as a searing mark is applied, sealing his new identity. The official proclaims him Kiran Belusis, bestowing upon him the prestigious rank of marked hunter and granting him unrestricted access to every hunting ground in the world. He looks forward with a cold, determined gaze, the realization of his new status sinking in. In the silence of his mind, he issues a silent challenge to Shiki, noting that he has finally closed the gap and is now just a single step behind his rival. Outside, the world continues its slow pace around a quiet establishment, unaware of the transformation that has just occurred within the guild's halls. Inside the dim tavern, the newly christened hunter sits in solitude, the heavy thud of his mug against the wooden table punctuating his brooding thoughts. He remains cloaked in shadow, the burden of his new title already weighing heavily upon him. His features, sharp and calculating, are illuminated by the flickering light as he contemplates the future. He knows that the celestial event known as the Starfall is approaching, and he anticipates that the coming year will be filled with significant challenges. The swirling patterns of a familiar mask serve as a final, haunting reminder of the path he has chosen, a symbol of the secret life he now leads as he prepares for what lies ahead. The small feline companion dashes across the rocky terrain, leaving a trail of dust behind as it scouts the path ahead for the group. It leads the way as Sakuya pauses, explaining that they'll have to stop at Pepero Village because their supplies are running low, though she questions if this treacherous path is truly the only way to the castle. She and the others continue their trek along the narrow, winding mountain trail, acknowledging that the journey ahead will be far from easy. They are suddenly startled by a loud noise echoing through the mountains, causing the group to stop in their tracks as Shiki calls out in surprise. While he laughs with excitement, claiming he's never seen anything like it, his companions are far more concerned, warning him that a monster is actually chasing them. The boy is quickly corrected by Eri, who glances back with a look of grim realization as the heavy, clawed foot of a beast slams into the ground behind them. She watches in horror as a Yayan-cut coup lets out a piercing screech, its frill flared and beak wide open as it confronts the hunters. It is not alone, as a whole pack of the creatures emerges from the dust, forcing the group to realize they are being hunted by an entire flock. The young hunter's eyes burn with a fierce determination as he lets out a defiant cry, ready to face the overwhelming odds. Before him, the pack of Yayan-cut screeches in a chaotic frenzy, their beaks snapping as they swarm through the rocky terrain. Seeing the sheer number of beasts, Eri questions if he truly intends to take them all on alone, while Sakuya reminds him that he hasn't even had time to master his newly forged blades. Ignoring their concerns, he leaps high into the air, drawing his dual swords and calling upon their power to unleash a devastating technique he calls the Heavenly Storm. As he descends, Sakuya watches in stunned silence, her eyes wide as the air itself seems to warp around the force of his strike. Beside her, Eri is equally breathless, struggling to comprehend the incredible display of skill unfolding before them. The echoes of the battle fade into the vast, silent expanse of the jagged mountain peaks that stretch toward the horizon. Far from the heat of combat, Kark sighs heavily over his notes, grumbling about the tedious necessity of filing reports on time. He is suddenly buffeted by a violent gust of wind that snatches the precious research papers right out of his hands. He cries out in alarm as his work scatters into the air, helpless against the sudden gale. Staring into the distance, the researcher's eyes widen in disbelief as he demands to know what is causing such a massive disturbance in the atmosphere. The source of the gale is a massive, swirling vortex of energy that has completely engulfed the pack of monsters, trapping them in a relentless, spiraling prison of wind. Witnessing this incredible display of power, he realizes that his next report will have to detail the sheer scale of this battle, having become an accidental witness to a legend in the making. Inside the churning winds, the creatures are helpless, their bodies tossed about like leaves in a storm as the pressure of the technique overwhelms them. At the heart of the tempest, the young hunter stands firm, his dual blades having carved a path of destruction through the air itself, while his companions watch the spectacle from the periphery. The researcher can only describe the phenomenon as a literal hurricane, his face lit with a mix of terror and scientific fascination at the raw power unleashed before him. Nearby, the blonde huntress beams with pride, genuinely impressed by how quickly her companion has mastered such a sophisticated and deadly weapon technique. She swings her massive weapon with a grunt of exertion, the sheer number of monsters beginning to weigh on her. Frustration colors her voice as she demands to know just how many more of these beasts they have to face in this relentless onslaught. He, however, remains undeterred, a confident grin spreading across his face as he prepares to lead the way. Declaring that they have lingered long enough, he urges the group to pick up the pace and make their escape before more trouble arrives. A map marks the location of Pepero Village, a remote settlement nestled between several hunting grounds. This village has long served as a vital outpost for independent hunters who operate outside the formal guild structure. With the recent discovery of natural hot springs, the village has transformed into a popular destination for tourists seeking relaxation. Taking advantage of the amenities, the young princess and the blacksmith soak in the steaming waters, the former exclaiming how wonderful the experience is while the latter agrees wholeheartedly. She wonders aloud about the source of the heat, noting that the area was once known only for its cold springs. Her companion jokingly suggests a Volganos might be lurking beneath the earth, warming the water with its presence, a theory she finds hard to believe. Suddenly, the tranquil surface of the pool begins to churn with mysterious bubbles, causing the blacksmith to cry out in alarm as she asks if a monster has appeared. As the water boils more violently, they cling to one another in terror, their screams echoing through the bathhouse. A massive eruption of water suddenly shatters the peace, signaling a chaotic intrusion into their moment of rest. The monster erupting from the steaming depths of the hot spring is no ancient beast, but a gasping, wild-eyed young man. He surges upward, spray flying in every direction, as he bellows the name of the lava-dwelling creature he supposedly resembles. He stands there, dripping and completely exposed, while the two women stare in stunned silence. The initial terror fades into a cold, sharp realization for the blonde hunter, while her companion can only watch with wide, unblinking eyes as the absurdity of the situation sinks in. Because of this intrusion, the warrior's shock instantly curdles into a violent rage. With a guttural cry of indignation, she lunges forward through the water, her fist connecting squarely with his face in a spray of droplets and sheer fury. While retreating from her relentless assault, he frantically tries to justify his presence, claiming he had been there first and simply hid when they arrived. His excuses do little to pacify her, as she continues to hurl insults and whatever objects are at hand while their feline companion watches the chaotic retreat from the sidelines. Moments later, the steam-filled bathhouse returns to a deceptive calm. The only sound remaining is the rhythmic, hollow clack of the bamboo pipe as it refills the stone basin, the violent outburst now nothing more than a lingering echo in the humid air. Later that evening, the trio sits around a low table laden with food, though the atmosphere remains thick with tension. The blacksmith is so overcome with mortification that she cannot even lift her gaze from the table, while the blonde hunter remains visibly repulsed. Meanwhile, the culprit himself sits with a swollen bruise on his head, wearing a shameless, satisfied grin as he helps himself to the meal. As they continue their meal, the conversation turns to the inevitable frictions that arise within mixed hunting parties. He remains oblivious to the gravity of his offense, questioning why he is still the target of their ire when, in his mind, the ordeal is already behind them. Their bickering is suddenly interrupted by two strangers who have been listening from nearby. A hunter clad in jagged, crystalline armor and his companion, a woman carrying a sturdy bow, step forward to offer their unsolicited advice, warning the group that they must reconcile before their internal strife destroys their bond as a team. She tries to de-escalate the tension, reminding her partner that the group before them are still just children. With a dismissive air, she suggests that it is high time they matured and learned how the world of hunters truly operates. Continuing her lecture, She explains that mixed-gender teams like theirs frequently encounter misunderstandings. She notes how often they're mistaken for a romantic couple, a notion they are forced to constantly refute to maintain their professional standing. This explanation only serves to baffle the young hunters, with one questioning the relevance of their relationship status to the current situation. In response, the newcomers burst into laughter. While the man boasts of his thrilling hunting style, his companion quickly clarifies that they are strictly brothers in arms. After the laughter subsides, she formally introduces herself as Emile and her partner as Zach. Her gaze lingers on the group, noting with a hint of amusement that despite their rough exterior and massive weapons, they seem surprisingly soft-hearted and naive. Her attention then shifts to a specific detail, as she points toward a distinct mark etched onto the young man's skin. He looks down in confusion as she asks if he is aware of the significance of the brand he carries. Her partner chimes in, his expression turning serious as he observes that all those bearing such marks are converging on this location. He reveals that they're all drawn by the lure of a competition known as the Starbreaker. The revelation leaves the trio stunned, prompting her to explain their own journey northward toward a labyrinth rumored to hold secrets of the legendary Myoguruna. She expresses genuine surprise that they are unaware of the gathering storm and the high-stakes event about to unfold. Under the cold light of the stars, the true nature of the event is laid bare. The Starbreaker is an exclusive, private competition for the marked. Here, warriors wager their very weapons, clashing in a brutal bid to be recognized as the undisputed strongest. Emile continues her explanation, revealing that the winner of this private tournament receives the ultimate prize. The group reacts with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Sakuya points out that no official guild would ever sanction a contest where hunters must wager their own weapons, while Shiki admits he has never heard of such a thing. To emphasize the stakes, she produces an old, weathered map, claiming it marks the exact location of the legendary Myoguruna. They stare at the parchment in stunned silence, their eyes wide as the reality of the discovery sinks in. He suddenly erupts with excitement, cheering at the prospect of finally entering a real competition, though his outburst is quickly met with a sharp command to settle down. While he celebrates, she remains focused on the inconsistencies, questioning how a map could exist for a place that is supposedly undiscovered. She agrees with the blacksmith's logic, noting that someone must have been there to draw it in the first place, leaving the young hunter looking sheepish as the mystery deepens. The group continues to debate the risks, still unable to fathom why anyone would gamble their primary tools of survival. While acknowledging that any organized event must have a mastermind behind it, she then drops a final, chilling detail, mentioning rumors that a mysterious figure known only as Shadow is the one pulling the strings behind the entire operation. She had just finished her explanation, leaving the group in a state of confusion. Shiki scratched his head, unable to recall anything about this cart person from his childhood. Eri, however, suddenly realized that this was exactly what the researcher had warned them about. As the realization set in, she clarified that she wasn't talking about Kark himself, but rather the mysterious figure known as Shadow. Sakuya added to the growing unease, mentioning rumors she'd heard about Kark being a notorious black market dealer, casting further doubt on the information they had received. The conversation was abruptly cut short as the two newcomers turned to leave. Emile offered a mocking farewell, noting that since the group had refused to join the official tournament, she would provide them with a private challenge instead. With a confident smirk, she mentioned a labyrinth located to the north that supposedly held a clue. She thanked them for the information they had unwittingly provided and told them to take care of themselves as she and her companion walked away. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, the trio could only watch in disbelief. Shiki finally found his voice, shouting for them to wait and protesting that the lead was rightfully theirs. But his words were met with the realization that they had been completely outmaneuvered. In his haste to give chase, the young hunter's foot caught on a hidden tripwire. With a startled cry, he was suddenly yanked off his feet as the trap was sprung. He found himself dangling helplessly upside down, the village street now a dizzying blur below him. It was clear now that their rivals hadn't just stolen their lead. They had ensured they wouldn't be followed by setting a cunning snare. While the group struggled with their predicament in the village, the focus shifted far away. High amidst the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the northern mountains, a silent and ominous atmosphere prevailed, hinting at the challenges that lay ahead. The marked hunters, those seeking the title of the strongest, have gathered to participate in the star-crushing competition. They face off against fearsome beasts in a display of raw power and skill, each strike bringing them closer to glory. Among these brave souls, one stands out with particular brilliance, a young man named Kirambalusis. His gaze is sharp and unwavering, focused entirely on the challenges that lie ahead in this brutal trial. With a thunderous roar and a flash of steel, the competition reaches its peak. A hunter drives a massive lance into his quarry, the impact sending shockwaves through the clearing as the beast finally collapses under the relentless assault. As the dust settles, The final tally is revealed on the Great Board. Based on the number and danger level of the monsters slain, the victor is declared Kiran Belusis. The announcement is met with shock and bitter resentment by his rivals, who cannot fathom losing to such a young boy. This victory comes with a harsh price for the defeated. According to the ancient rules of the tournament, the losers must surrender their weapons to the champion. Cries of despair and pleas for mercy ring out from the crowd as they face the loss of their very livelihoods. From the edge of the clearing, a shadowed figure watches the proceedings with a cold, knowing smile. This mysterious observer remains hidden in the darkness, his presence a silent, ominous weight upon the celebration. He, the new champion, closes his eyes for a moment, perhaps reflecting on the weight of his victory and the cost paid by those he bested. His expression remains unreadable, a mask of stoic calm amidst the surrounding turmoil. As the day draws to a close, the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rugged mountain landscape. The tournament is over, but the ripples of Kiran's triumph are only beginning to spread across the land. Shiki praises the swordsman for his performance, calling him Prince, though the title clearly irritates him. He dismisses the praise, insisting he not be addressed that way, even as they stand before the threshold of their next destination. Entering the storehouse, he finds the skull-masked man reveling in the mountain of weapons Kiran has delivered. The masked figure acknowledges the completion of their deal, handing over the map to Mayagaru as promised. He stands amidst the steel, declaring with a triumphant gesture that all these weapons now belong to him. The swordsman remains silent, watching the eccentric collector claim his prize. However, his laughter soon turns to a sigh of disappointment as he realizes the specific treasure he sought is missing from the pile. When questioned about his plans for the remaining junk, he admits he will likely just sell it off. He explains that his true goal was the legendary wind sword, a weapon that failed to appear among the spoils. His voice carries a weight of long-held obsession as he looks toward the light of the window. This obsession, he reveals, was the very reason he joined the Union of Weaponsmiths years ago. His sole purpose in life had become the creation of that singular, mythical blade. He recounts how his research began with great promise, but the path was arduous and the guild eventually withdrew their support, leading to the Union's collapse. Despite the setback, his resolve never wavered as he continued his quest alone. After years of solitary study buried in ancient texts, a glimmer of hope finally emerged. A rumor reached his ears of a young boy who had been seen carrying the very weapon he had spent his life chasing. He stands amidst the wreckage, his mind racing with disbelief. The power of the wind sword he witnessed was beyond comprehension, easily melting through defenses. He realizes that the boy wielding it was none other than Shiki Ryuhu, and the question of how such a youth came to possess a weapon of that caliber gnaws at him. Nearby, the researcher's face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He screams into the air, swearing that he will never forgive the one who crossed him. His obsession boils over as he demands to know the origin of those swords, his eyes wide with a manic intensity. As the prince listens in silence, the man continues his frantic tirade. He curses the wind swords, claiming they were his own creations, developed through his own genius. He spits venom at the guild elders, those stupid old men who had the audacity to brand his life's work as illegal and cast him out. The masked figure turns away from the ranting man, his gaze falling upon a heap of discarded steel. He then addresses the prince directly, his voice low and calculating. Apologizing for his earlier lack of restraint, he proposes a new arrangement, a second deal to replace the one that fell through. Leaning in, the darkness of his mask seems to swallow the light as he utters a cold, singular command. He wants the prince to eliminate Shiki Ryuhu on his behalf. The prince's eye narrows, a sharp glint of calculation reflecting the weight of the request. Standing side by side, the masked hunter declares that since their initial plan has failed, they must now resort to overwhelming force. He promises that by combining their strengths, they will achieve a level of power and influence that neither could reach alone. He continued the dark negotiation, suggesting they simply frame the upcoming event as a tragic accident. The researcher, intrigued but cautious, questioned the logistics of how such a feat could be accomplished. Standing amidst the cluttered workshop, he urged his companion to consider the mutual benefits of their alliance, pointing out that both stood to gain immensely. The researcher paused, the weight of the proposal finally sinking in as he realized the potential. He then shifted the conversation, wanting to clarify a specific point before proceeding further. With a dark glint in his eye, he remarked that if Shiki were to simply vanish, their lives would become significantly less complicated. A knowing smirk played across his lips as he dropped a bombshell, accusing the man of being the secret mastermind behind the Starbreaker organization. The revelation struck the researcher like a physical blow, his composure momentarily shattering. He watched as the man recovered quickly, letting out a boisterous laugh and confirming the suspicion. The researcher explained that, as the organizer, he had nothing to fear, detailing his method of striking deals with the most formidable hunters to ensure their victory in exchange for the spoils. He continued to observe the man's display of arrogance, noting that while the plan was clever, it was riddled with potential risks. He observed that when greed is the primary motivator, most hunters are far too distracted to ask the right questions. Yet he remained curious about how the researcher had managed to evade detection for so long. His gaze hardened as he reached a chilling conclusion. The guild remained completely oblivious to the existence of these so-called tournament monsters. He listened as the researcher explained that the creatures used in the games were his own property, providing a steady stream of rare materials for his private studies. Recognizing their shared goals, the man offered to reveal a deeper secret, momentarily slipping into his habit of using titles before addressing his new ally simply as Kiron. He continues his boast, dismissing the threat of a guild investigation. He claims his long tenure in this illicit trade has made him untouchable, noting that no lawman has ever managed to track his movements, despite the obvious illegality of his work. Turning slightly with a confident smirk, the cloaked man adds that by the time any authority manages to catch up, every shred of evidence will have long since vanished, ensuring his continued freedom. He leans in, his gaze intensifying as he addresses the young hunter. He promises that he can provide everything the boy desires, specifically offering a path to limitless power if he joins their cause. Instead of being swayed, the youth points a finger and grins triumphantly. He declares the situation perfect, pointing out that the man has just openly confessed to being a poacher, falling right into his trap. Suddenly, a signal is given, and a command rings out through the air. The authorities are summoned to seize the criminal, officially declaring that the man known as Shadow is now an outlaw. The sudden ambush leaves the cloaked figure stunned. From the shadows, a squad of heavily armed guild hunters emerges, their weapons drawn and ready for a confrontation. Surrounded on all sides, the man can only stare in disbelief as the lead hunter reiterates the charges. They are under arrest for the crime of poaching, and there is no escape. As the trap closes, the young hunter reveals his source, mentioning a story told by a friend where a certain name was mentioned. The man's composure shatters completely, his face pale with sweat as he demands to know the meaning of this betrayal. He stands firm, his voice ringing with righteous anger as he accuses the fallen prince of causing deep psychological scars. He points out that because of those past actions, the girl behind them had been left unable to trust or work with any partner for a long time. In response to the accusation, the cornered man snarls, branding his captor a traitorous, ungrateful beast. He rages about how he was the one who helped the youth become marked, only to be met with a calm, almost mocking acceptance of that supposed debt. As the guild hunters tighten their grip, the prisoner's composure shatters completely, his face contorting as he screams that everything is a blatant lie. He accuses the young hunter of using him, but the youth merely stares back with cold eyes, stating simply that he refuses to lose to a man like him. With the immediate threat neutralized, the focus shifts to the aftermath as the disgraced leader is marched away under heavy guard. The large, mohawked hunter approaches, offering gruff praise for the efficiency of the operation and the performance of his subordinates. The stern guild official interrupts the moment, his expression unreadable as he acknowledges the invaluable assistance provided in capturing the elusive Shadow. However, he quickly adds a sobering reminder. The administration cannot simply ignore the fact that the Mohawk hunter was also entangled in the very schemes they just dismantled. Ignoring the official's warning for a moment, the large man turns his attention to a weathered map held by the young hunter, questioning its significance. The youth, his mind clearly elsewhere, dismisses the inquiry, stating that the document no longer holds any meaning for him. He watches in silence as the young swordsman begins to walk away, leaving the remnants of the conspiracy behind. With a dismissive grunt, the Mohawked hunter tosses the map aside, labeling it as nothing more than worthless trash. Alone with his thoughts, the young hunter's gaze hardens with a new, singular purpose. He makes a silent, ironclad vow to himself. He will grow stronger and eventually surpass the man who once looked down on him, and he will do it entirely on his own terms, without relying on anyone else's aid. He and his companions finally reached their destination after 4 days of travel. The vast, crumbling ruins stretched out before them, ancient stone structures half buried in the sand. Looking around with frustration, he wondered aloud where their targets were hiding. Beside him, the blonde hunter remarked that the place felt more like a barren desert than the labyrinth they expected. However, the blacksmith remained focused, announcing with certainty that they had finally arrived at the correct location. Long ago, these lands are the heart of a thriving empire. Because of its endless treasures and fertile soil, contemporaries called it the Golden Palace. However, such wealth brought not only prosperity, but also misfortune. The ancients whispered that the desert itself would swallow it, as the city faced constant attacks from both men and the elements until it finally crumbled into ruins. Centuries have slipped away since that fall, and now, no one truly knows how much time has passed in the silence of the wasteland. Like the fabled city of Gilgamesh, the site transformed into a labyrinth of treasures, drawing hunters from across the world to its sun-bleached remains. Standing amidst the rubble, the princess recounts a dark legend, her face tight with intensity. She explains how the spirit of a defeated king took the form of a monster, casting a curse upon any who would dare lay claim to his gold. Her eyes widen as the realization hits her, and she turns to her companion, suggesting that the zombie dragon Gerkuza might actually be that vengeful monarch. He remains silent, watching her with a stoic expression. The thought consumes her, and she begins to tremble, tears welling in her eyes, as she concludes that the dragon is indeed the king's ghost. Seeing her distress, he scoffs at the notion, questioning if she is truly afraid of ghosts. She snaps back in a panic, insisting that no one believes in such things, even as her composure completely fails her. She lets out a blood-curdling scream, her eyes wide with a terror that seems to vibrate through her entire being. Beside her, the young hunter watches in stunned silence, his expression a mix of confusion and concern as she rants about the spectral remains of the beasts they had previously vanquished. She is met with a sheepish admission as he tries to soothe her frayed nerves, confessing that the tale of the king's ghost was merely a fabrication of his own making. This revelation only fuels her ire. She rounds on him, her fear instantly replaced by a sharp, indignant fury as she berates him for his childish deception and labels him a coward. Setting her anger aside for a moment, she adopts a more focused demeanor, raising a finger to emphasize the gravity of their mission. She reminds him that they aren't there for games, but to confront the dragon Gerkuza and secure the elusive star shards, though she can't help but add that finding a few clues to the ancient treasures wouldn't hurt their cause. She continues to lead the conversation, suggesting they pivot their strategy after he laments the fact that someone has already made off with their primary lead. Seeing the logic in his frustration, she proposes that they prioritize locating the entrance to the labyrinth before attempting to track down those who cross them. Suddenly, the rhythmic sound of approaching footsteps echoes through the desolate ruins, causing her to freeze and scan the horizon with narrowed eyes. He tenses up beside her, his hand moving toward his weapon as he whispers a nervous question about whether the Phantom King might actually be real. She watches as two heavily armored figures emerge from the shadows of the crumbling stone structures, their boisterous laughter cutting through the tense silence of the desert. The woman leads the way, her ornate plate armor clinking with every step, while her companion follows close behind, his face partially obscured by a jagged, crystalline helm. She and her companion are met with stares of disbelief from the two hunters, their previous anxieties momentarily forgotten in the face of this new development. He is the first to find his voice, noting with a hint of grim satisfaction that the very people they were looking for have delivered themselves right to them. He watches as the two groups converge amidst the sun-bleached ruins, and Eri demands an explanation for their disheveled appearance. The newcomers seem winded but triumphant, their presence confirming that the path ahead is far more crowded than the hunters had initially anticipated. She watches as the two newcomers collapse in exhaustion. Zack, his breath coming in ragged gasps, immediately offers a surrender they didn't ask for, stammering out an apology for their pathetic state. Because of their sudden collapse, the others rush to their side. The young girl from the town asks if they are unharmed, while the princess demands to know what could have possibly driven them to such a state of panic. Shiki remains silent, his gaze narrowing as he senses the gravity of the situation. In response to her sharp questioning, the archer looks up, her face pale and slick with cold sweat. With a trembling voice, she manages to utter the name that has haunted their journey, Gerkuza. It is clear that the skeletal dragon is the source of their absolute terror. As she trembles, he remains unfazed by the name of the beast. A cold, sharp focus settles over his features, his eyes reflecting a resolve that has only grown stronger in the face of this revelation. While he processes the news, Zack struggles to push himself up from the dirt, his body trembling from the ordeal. He warns them that the battle is far from over, explaining that even 10 hunters wouldn't be enough to bring down such a monstrous beast. As the weight of his words hangs in the air, the young hunter steps forward into the center of the ruins. He commands them to cast aside their fear and prepare their weapons, his voice cutting through the despair like a blade. He then points a finger toward their unseen foe, his stance radiating an unshakable confidence. He declares that they will pool every ounce of their remaining strength into a single, final, and decisive strike. Following his bold proclamation, the group stares back in stunned silence. Their fear begins to give way to a flicker of hope, ignited by his unwavering determination. The group pauses to reflect on Shiki's words. He mentions a lesson from his master about not being sad, but Eri remains skeptical, her brow furrowed as she questions the logic behind such cryptic advice. She quickly loses patience, dismissing his master's wisdom as nonsense and urging the group to keep moving. He tries to clarify, suggesting the meaning was deeper, but her sharp retort cuts him off as they press forward. Their path leads them to the mouth of a sprawling, ancient ruin. The weathered stone tiles and crumbling pillars speak of a civilization long forgotten, swallowed by the earth. Stepping inside, the air grows heavy and cool. The corridor stretches deep into the hillside, lined with rough-hewn stone and mysterious alcoves that disappear into shadow. Along the walls, grotesque stone faces are carved into the masonry, their mouths agape, as if frozen in a silent, eternal scream. As they venture deeper, the atmosphere becomes increasingly oppressive. Airy voices her unease, convinced the place is crawling with spirits, while the others try to maintain their focus despite the eerie surroundings. Suddenly, a low, rhythmic thrumming begins to vibrate through the floor and walls. The group freezes, their eyes darting around as the sound intensifies, signaling that they are no longer alone in the depths. They look upward in unison, their faces pale with shock. Something massive is shifting above them, and the realization of what they've stumbled into begins to dawn on them. She stares upward in paralyzed terror as a colossal boulder, easily the size of a small house, begins its thunderous descent from the ceiling. The sheer scale of the stone is overwhelming, and the young man beside her can only shout in disbelief at the massive weight about to crush them. They manage to scramble back just in time, and as the dust begins to settle, the young man wonders aloud if this is one of the ancient, unusual mechanisms his grandfather, Kibarian, had warned him about. The blonde warrior woman realizes with a grim scowl that the entire entrance was nothing more than a calculated trap, and she is stunned that such a device could still be functional after so many centuries. Their brief moment of reflection is shattered as the boulder begins to roll down the narrow corridor with a deafening roar. He bellows for everyone to move, urging them to run for their lives as the massive stone gains momentum, filling the entire width of the passage behind them. He spots a small alcove in the stone wall ahead and points it out as a potential refuge. However, as they draw closer, his hope fades. The opening is dangerously narrow, and it seems impossible for all of them to fit inside before the boulder reaches them. They barely manage to squeeze into the shallow crevice, pressing their backs against the cold stone as the massive boulder thunders past, missing them by mere inches. For a heartbeat, they breathe a sigh of relief, thinking the danger has passed, but the floor beneath their feet suddenly groans and begins to tilt. The floor tiles give way completely, transforming into a steep slide that drops into a dark abyss. They are thrown into a chaotic tumble, their screams echoing through the ruins as they realize they are falling into the unknown depths of the ancient structure. She cries out in pain and alarm as the descent becomes even more treacherous. Amidst the confusion of the fall, she realizes that another trap has been triggered. A poisoned arrow has grazed her, and the venom begins to take hold even as she plummets through the darkness. She falls headlong down a vertical shaft lined with jagged, unforgiving rocks. Far below, the faint light reveals a grim sight. A skeletal remains resting near a heavy iron gate, suggesting that many have met their end in this pit before them. He is already at her side as she begins to stir, her eyes fluttering open in the dim light of the pit. Disoriented, she murmurs a soft question, wondering where they are as the fog of unconsciousness slowly lifts. As the haze clears, a sharp, stinging pain flares in her arm, causing her to wince and let out a pained groan. The reality of their situation begins to set in as she struggles against the throbbing ache. Seeing her distress, the young hunter remains hunched over her, his focus entirely on the wound. She calls out his name, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and growing alarm at his proximity to her injury. Without a moment's hesitation, he presses his lips to the puncture mark, drawing out the dark, tainted blood. He sternly commands her to stay still, explaining his intent to suck the venom from her system before it can spread further. She tries to reassure him that she is fine, but he won't hear of it, his voice thick with determination as he tells her not to even contemplate death. They lie amidst the cold stone and debris of the pit, the weight of their isolation pressing in on them. A sharp gasp escapes her as the process continues, the sensation both painful and jarring. He pauses briefly to spit out the foul liquid, warning her that this is no ordinary toxin. It is the venom of an emo gru, a slow-acting but lethal substance that demands immediate action. After several tense moments, he finally pulls away, instructing her to test the mobility of her wrist. A wave of relief washes over her, and she looks at him with a soft, appreciative smile, realizing the depth of his concern for her well-being. Standing up to survey their grim surroundings, she suddenly realizes a member of their party is missing and asks about the princess's whereabouts. He scans the debris-strewn floor, suggesting she must have landed somewhere nearby, before teasingly warning her that if the numbness returns, he'll have to repeat the treatment, a prospect she frantically rejects, insisting she feels much better. He insists that she remain behind for her own safety, despite her fierce protest that being alone in these ruins is far more perilous. He turns his back on her, determined to move quickly and find their missing companion. The vast, circular chamber of the pit stretches out around them, a crumbling monument of ancient stone and debris that seems to swallow the light. Elsewhere in the damp darkness, the princess huddles under a tattered cloth, shivering from the cold. She curses her luck, wondering where her companions have gone and sneezing violently after her unfortunate tumble into a stagnant puddle. Suddenly, she freezes, her eyes widening as a strange rustling sound echoes through the hollow corridor. She stands tall on a jagged ledge, gripping her heavy weapon with trembling hands and shouting into the gloom that she isn't afraid of a few mere insects. The sound intensifies, a rhythmic scraping against the stone walls that suggests something large is approaching from the shadows. Her bravado wavers as she continues to scream her defiance, her voice cracking as she tries to convince herself that there is nothing to fear in the oppressive silence. Without warning, the stone floor beneath her erupts in a cloud of dust and rock, sending her reeling as a massive force tears through the ruins. The floor erupts in a violent cloud of debris and dust, obscuring the narrow stone corridor as a hidden mechanism is triggered. Emerging from the haze, she coughs violently, cursing the clumsy trap that nearly caught her off guard while a figure looms in the smoke. As the dust begins to settle, a familiar face appears through the gloom, his eyes widening in disbelief as he calls out her name. She stares back, her breath catching as she recognizes the prince standing before her in the heart of the ruins. Standing amidst the rubble, they demand answers from one another. He questions why she isn't with Shiki, while she demands to know what business he has in such a desolate place. He suddenly tenses, his gaze darting around the shadows as he realizes they aren't alone, sensing a presence he describes as a lurking freak nearby. Turning her attention back to the immediate mystery, she questions how he even gained entry, reminding him that only those bearing the mark are permitted to hunt in these grounds. He responds with a sharp, knowing smirk, revealing that he is indeed here to hunt, having finally secured the mark for himself. He leans in, his voice low as he explains that this location is the key to finding information on the elusive Myogaruna. Aries' eyes widen in disbelief at the mention of the legendary creature. Continuing his revelation, he declares that since he has obtained the mark, Shiki Ruhu is no longer of any use to him. Aerie recoils, her voice trembling as she asks when he began to put faith in such omens, reminding him of his previous skepticism. The prince fixes her with a piercing, determined gaze, ignoring her protests. He simply extends an invitation for her to join him on this new path. He promises that together, they will be the ones to finally track down Myogaruna. Aerie can only whisper his name, her expression a mask of confusion and growing concern for the man she thought she knew. Suddenly, the ground trembles and a deafening roar shatters the tense silence, sending clouds of dust billowing through the ruins. Looking up toward a dark, gaping void that has appeared above them, he wonders aloud if this is the work of a monster or perhaps the skeletal dragon, Gerkuza itself. He readies his weapon, his resolve hardening as he declares his intent to face the beast head-on. Aerie cries out in alarm, questioning his reckless plan and warning him of the sheer impossibility of such a frontal assault. Before she can stop him, a blinding pillar of light erupts from the earth, consuming everything in a violent flash of pure energy. Aerie's voice rings out with a sharp, "I told you so," as dust settles within the stone arena. Huron, however, remains unfazed, his gaze fixed on the pit below. He calmly explains that his strike wasn't intended to land, but merely to draw their quarry into the open. She watches with wide-eyed anticipation as the ground begins to tremble. With a defiant shout, they call for the beast to show itself, demanding that Gerkuza face them at last. Suddenly, the stone walls shatter as the monstrous Gerkuza erupts from the depths, its skeletal frame letting out a bone-chilling roar that fills the ruins. The creature begins to scale the vertical walls with terrifying agility, its appearance prompting a gasp from the princess, who mistakes its translucent form for a mere skeleton. He quickly corrects her, noting that the beast's skin is simply so thin that its internal structure is visible to the naked eye. When she asks if they truly have a chance against such a horror, he offers only a cold, confident smirk. Its massive, unblinking eye fixes upon them, reflecting a primal hunger as the dragon prepares its next move. As the shadow of the beast looms over them, the prince stands his ground, declaring his intent to prove his superiority over his rival through this hunt. Huron and Aerie stand ready, their eyes fixed on the skeletal dragon, Gerkuza, who looms above them. They are the only two left to face the master of this labyrinth. Suddenly, the beast lunges. Huron screams for Aerie to jump as the massive skeletal head snaps forward, its jaws wide and hungry. She heeds the warning, leaping high into the air. With a defiant shout, she swings her massive weapon, reminding her foe that she is a hunter, not some helpless princess, while Chiron watches her ascent with focused intensity. In response, the dragon unleashes a deafening, soul-shaking roar. The sheer force of the sound waves pins them back, and Eri clutches her head in agony, feeling as though her skull might shatter from the vibration. The creature follows the roar with a devastating physical strike. Its massive, bony limb crashes into the ground with enough force to shatter the very stone beneath them. He grinds his teeth, struggling to stay upright amidst the onslaught. The situation is dire, and he can't help but curse their luck as the skeletal monstrosity stares them down with its hollow, haunting gaze. Just as the pressure becomes unbearable, a sudden, violent explosion rocks the dragon's skull. The impact is precise and powerful, catching the beast completely off guard. They both look up, stunned by the sudden turn of events. A smoking projectile falls away as Chiron seizes the opening, launching himself forward with a powerful kick to capitalize on the monster's momentary disorientation. He watches as Shiki suddenly leaps into the fray with a roar, his arrival catching everyone off guard. Sakuya, Eri, and Chiron look up in shock, wondering how the young hunter managed to reach them so quickly. The impact of the sudden intervention sends a shockwave through the air, momentarily disorienting the skeletal beast. Gerkuza recoils, its massive, bony frame rattling as the force of the blow connects. Shiki lands and quickly explains that the explosion they heard was a dragon cannon projectile, checking to see if Eri is unharmed. Chiron remains silent, his gaze fixed on the newcomer with a mixture of suspicion and recognition. He then turns his attention to Chiron, questioning why he is here and noting the irony of their meeting. Sakuya watches the exchange, noting the strange tension between the two men as they stand amidst the ruins. Meanwhile, the skeletal dragon begins to stir once more, smoke curling from its fractured skull as it prepares to renew its assault. The brief respite provided by the explosion is rapidly coming to an end. Seeing the danger, he bluntly tells the others to get out of the way, declaring that he will handle the monster alone. Shiki immediately protests, arguing that they need to combine their strength to stand any chance against such a foe. He flatly refuses the offer of help, his pride refusing to yield even as the dragon lunges forward with renewed ferocity. Sakuya screams, a warning, as the ground trembles beneath the weight of the beast's impending strike. From the periphery, the goggled hunter watches in alarm as the massive tail of the dragon smashes into the stone structures nearby. The battle is escalating beyond anyone's control, and the lone warrior's stubbornness may be his undoing. He watches from the shadows, a silent observer as the skeletal dragon, Gerkuza, lashes out with its massive, bony tail. Amidst the chaos, the prince stubbornly rejects any assistance, roaring that the beast is his prey alone and ordering the others to stay back, while the princess marvels at the creature's sheer, wall-like scale. Ignoring the demand, the young hunter lunges forward and grabs the prince by his collar, his face set in a mask of frustration. He barks that no true hunter would ever abandon a companion, and that the prince needs to stop acting as if he is the only one who matters in this fight. As the dragon looms over them like a mountain of ancient bone, he continues his desperate plea, arguing that their only hope for survival lies in a single, coordinated effort. The prince, however, remains unmoved, his eyes cold as he reiterates his refusal to cooperate with those he deems beneath him. Seeing the deadlock, the blacksmith steps forward, her voice ringing out with a clarity that cuts through the roar of the wind. She urges them to combine their strengths, insisting that the four of them together possess the power to overcome this nightmare, and she implores the prince to place his trust in Shiki as a true comrade. He stands silent for a moment, the word comrade seemingly echoing in his mind as he stares at the determined young woman. The weight of her words hangs heavy in the air, momentarily stalling his prideful defiance as he questions the very nature of his solitary path. The brief respite is shattered as the skeletal beast arches its neck, drawing in a massive, rattling breath that seems to suck the very air from the surroundings. The hunters watch in growing dread, realizing the creature is preparing an attack far more devastating than anything they have yet faced. Sensing the impending catastrophe, he breaks into a sprint, his blade held ready as he shouts for the others to strike immediately. There is no more time for debate. They must disrupt the dragon's focus before it can unleash its gathered energy. But the warning comes too late as a torrent of dark, malevolent force erupts from the dragon's maw, engulfing the battlefield in a blinding explosion of power. The ground trembles under the sheer weight of the blast, leaving the fate of the hunters obscured by a cloud of dust and shadow. It exhales a thick, choking black gas that engulfs the hunters. Shiki coughs violently, struggling to breathe, while Eri realizes with alarm that the dark mist is more than just smoke. Amidst the swirling darkness, Sakuya kneels on the ground, her eyes wide with fear as she calls out for her companion. Just inches away, the massive, armored limb of the beast looms, threatening to crush everything in its path. Seeing the opening, Chiron stands firm, his blade drawn and ready. Shiki looks up at him with a renewed sense of hope, and the two warriors lock eyes, realizing that their only chance is a coordinated strike to end the battle once and for all. He grins with fierce determination, promising to provide the support needed for this final gambit. His grip tightens on his weapon, the weight of the moment fueling his resolve. With a rallying cry, the entire group assembles, their individual strengths finally merging into a single, unified front. They charge forward together, a desperate but powerful phalanx against the skeletal nightmare. The battlefield becomes a blur of motion as Eri and Sakuya strike with precision, distracting the monster while Chiron prepares his most devastating technique. Every movement is calculated, every blow aimed at creating the perfect opening. He lunges forward, his weapon glowing with an intense, volatile energy that crackles through the air. He shouts for his comrades to clear the way, declaring that his ultimate attack is fully charged and ready to be unleashed. The sudden surge of power catches even Chiron off guard, his eyes widening in shock as the ground erupts in a blinding flash. The sheer force of the impact shakes the very foundations of the earth, signaling the climax of their struggle. He watches as the young hunter moves with blinding speed, still possessing an incredible amount of power despite the long battle. Nearby, the blacksmith struggles to find her mark through the chaos, but the boy shouts for her to stand back and leave the rest in. With a sudden, violent rotation, he whips the air into a frenzy, creating a massive, swirling vortex that engulfs the skeletal dragon. The beast's roar is drowned out by the howling winds of the artificial storm. The swordsman looks on, his expression unreadable, as the boy signals that the moment has arrived. Behind them, the princess and the blacksmith can only stare in awe at the sheer scale of the tornado he has conjured. The vortex collapses inward with a thunderous boom, striking the monster with the full force of the accumulated energy. The impact shatters the air, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. As the dust begins to settle, the princess and the swordsman remain tense, their eyes searching the haze for any sign of movement. The silence that follows the explosion is heavy and expected. They watch as the massive, bony frame of the dragon finally gives way, crumbling under the weight of the devastating blow. The young hunter and the blacksmith stand breathless, witnessing the end of their long struggle. The skeletal remains of the beast lie motionless on the scorched earth, smoke curling from its shattered ribs. The threat that loomed over them for so long has finally been extinguished. Relief washes over the group as the princess and the blacksmith find comfort in each other's presence, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Nearby, the boy turns back toward them, a triumphant and weary smile lighting up his face. He stands amidst the rubble, the cheers of victory echoing through the ruins as the hunters celebrate their hard-won triumph over the skeletal dragon. Eri acknowledges the feat, noting that as expected of the prince, their combined efforts bore fruit. Sakuya agrees, reflecting on how well the four of them worked together. Meanwhile, the prince remains aloof, prompting a playful jab from the young hunter about their shared success. Because of this shared moment, he beams with pride, insisting that they truly did make an excellent team despite their differences. The prince, however, seems less than convinced, his expression remaining stoic and detached. Eri and Sakuya observe the exchange, the tension of battle finally beginning to ebb away. As the conversation continues, his attention is suddenly drawn upward by a strange flickering in the dark sky. He lets out a soft hum of curiosity, noticing small, luminous specks beginning to drift down like silent snow. In response to this phenomenon, he reaches out, his confusion growing as he realizes these aren't snowflakes at all. They look like fireflies, yet their presence here, in the wake of such destruction, feels eerie and misplaced. Moments later, the entire horizon is transformed as thousands of these glowing orbs begin to ascend, bathing the ruined city in a ghostly, ethereal light. The hunters stand paralyzed by the sight, the sheer scale of the display leaving them breathless. As the light intensifies, the realization hits them that these stars are inextricably linked to the fallen beast. The remains of the dragon begin to shimmer, and the group watches in horror as the very air seems to vibrate with a renewed, unsettling energy. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet begins to heave and groan, a violent tremor signaling that the danger is far from over. He shouts for everyone to move, realizing that the area has become a death trap, caught in a surreal space between heaven and hell. Amidst the chaos, the massive skeletal structure of the dragon starts to disintegrate, the bones cracking and falling away in a deafening cascade of stone and ancient magic. He and the prince can only watch in stunned silence as the monument to their victory crumbles into nothingness. He watches in horror as the earth splits open, giving birth to a radiant, shimmering dragon that rises from the very spot where the skeletal remains once lay. The beast's presence leaves the hunters paralyzed with disbelief, its arrival seemingly fulfilling a dark prophecy. While the young swordsman shouts that this must be some cruel joke, the others can only stare as the ancient words echo in their minds. A dragon that brings calamity to both land and sky, destined to extinguish all life. They watch as a colossal pillar of light erupts toward the heavens, shattering the ground and scattering debris like dust in the wind. The stars themselves begin to fade from the night sky, leaving only the terrifying silhouette of Mayogaruna to dominate the horizon. A blinding pillar of light erupts, shattering the remains of the skeletal beast and sending massive chunks of rock and debris hurtling into the air. The sheer force of the transformation shakes the very foundations of the cavern as the shining dragon, Mayogaruna, begins to manifest. Amidst the chaos, the young hunter and his companion watch in disbelief as a new form emerges from within the fallen Gerkuza. He observes that the creature is passing through the old bones with ease, noting that its skeletal structure appears entirely different from the monster they just fought, suggesting a rebirth rather than a simple transformation. They stand transfixed by the radiant spectacle before them. The princess recalls her father's warnings about this legendary being, while the leader of the Hellhounds finds himself overwhelmed by a brightness he never expected. The realization hits them all at once. The shining dragon has finally revealed itself in all its terrifying glory. As the magnificent creature takes flight, ascending through the ceiling of the crumbling chamber, the group realizes their immediate danger. He shouts a warning that the cavern can no longer hold together and urges everyone to evacuate before they are buried under the falling stones. Pausing for a fleeting second, the swordsman stares into the darkness where the dragon vanished, a new fire burning in his eyes. He understands that the time has come to truly test his limits, questioning if he has what it takes to become a hunter worthy of such a legend. Once outside, they find the night sky transformed, bathed in an eerie, artificial daylight cast by the departing beast. Looking upward, the group searches the heavens, trying to track the path of the light as it streaks across the horizon, leaving the desert illuminated in its wake. Without wasting another moment, the companions charge forward into the dunes. Their resolve is absolute as they follow the trail of the shining dragon, their footsteps heavy, but determined in the shifting sands as they leave the ruins behind. A massive sandstorm begins to howl across the desert, threatening to swallow them whole, but they refuse to falter. They vow to give everything they have to push through the gale, knowing that if they can survive this storm, they will finally reach Mayogaruna. He stares in disbelief as the possibility is raised that the magnificent creature they just witnessed might have been nothing more than an illusion. The leader of the Hellhounds questions if the dragon was truly there, casting doubt on the reality of the spectacle that just unfolded before them. In response to this skepticism, the prince suggests that what they saw could have been the lingering spirit of the ancient city of Gilgamesh. However, the young hunter remains firm, insisting with fierce conviction that he saw the shining dragon with his own two eyes, refusing to let his senses be dismissed so easily. He continues his analysis, pointing out that such a small body could not have possibly emerged from the massive remains of Gerkuza. He reasons that the objects they believe to be star fragments are likely not the eggs of Mayogaruna at all, further deepening the mystery of the dragon's origin. The strategist then proposes a startling theory, that this entity is one of the many potential forms of Mayogaruna, one that has reached maturity and successfully overcome Gerkuza. Eri listens intently, trying to grasp the logic, questioning if the act of defeating the skeletal dragon was what triggered the transformation into the radiant beast. Admitting that these are merely his own deductions, the prince ponders the long history of the site, wondering why an egg would have been placed there so many ages ago. He notes that the creature eventually emerged from deep within the earth, suggesting a dormant power that has finally been awakened. As he speaks, a vision of the ancient city of Gilgamesh being razed to the ground comes to mind, and he clarifies that the force responsible for that destruction was not Mayogaruna. He explains that this location served as a sanctuary where the egg was kept, and now the dragon is reclaiming its lost strength. The revelation leaves the young hunter stunned, as he struggles to reconcile this with the history of a city that supposedly lacked the power to wage war. A grim realization dawns on him. The people of that era had no hunters to protect them from such overwhelming forces. Despite the knowledge that Mayogaruna's presence heralds catastrophe for both the heavens and the earth, a part of him finds a strange sense of rightness in the challenge it presents. United by a newfound purpose, the companions resolve that they must confront the beast and return it to the realm of myth and illusion. The young hunter declares that this is the true calling of their kind, and as the desert winds begin to die down, they prepare to step out of the shadows and begin their pursuit. The sandstorm is finally cleared, revealing a breathtaking sight, a hidden valley overflowing with a sea of vibrant flowers, nestled securely between jagged mountain peaks. They stand in awe, questioning how such a lush paradise could exist hidden behind the relentless desert winds. One wonders if this is some kind of amusement park, while another can't believe a flower field could survive here. Suddenly, a blinding light erupts from above, catching them completely off guard. This radiant glow descends with an intensity that forces them to shield their eyes, as if the sun itself had come down to meet them. He gazes upward, noting that the presence within the light seems to be waiting for their arrival. Beside him, the young huntress grips her weapon, her expression hardening as the crystalline structures around them begin to resonate with the approaching power. The creature's massive, reptilian eye narrows, focusing its ancient gaze directly on the young hunter. He stares back, his breath catching as he feels the sheer weight of the beast's intent. With a deafening roar that shakes the very foundations of the valley, the dragon fully manifests, its body a terrifying fusion of organic power and jagged, crystalline growths. It unleashes a devastating shockwave, a wall of pure force that tears through the flower field and sends the hunters reeling backward. As they struggle to find their footing, the beast unhinges its massive jaws, a blinding energy gathering within its throat, ready to deliver a final, crushing blow. It unleashes a deafening roar, its crystalline body shimmering with a terrifying, ancient power as it prepares to strike. Seeing the beast's intent, Chiron narrows his eyes and commands the group to ready their weapons for the coming onslaught. They stand united against the radiant threat, a group of hunters destined to become legends as they grip their weapons with resolve. With a defiant cry, Shiki lunges forward, his eyes fixed on the massive dragon looming over the field of flowers. As he closes the distance, the dragon lashes out, forcing the hunters to weave through a chaotic flurry of claws and energy. Seizing an opening, Sakuya swings her massive hammer with bone-shattering force, aiming directly for the creature's snapping jaws. The resulting collision sends a violent shockwave through the valley, throwing the hunters back as the ground itself trembles. Suddenly, a dark, swirling vortex of energy erupts, trapping Shiki's leg and pinning him down under an unbearable pressure of wind that makes it impossible to even aim his blade. He remains trapped within the swirling chaos as the great dragon lets out a deafening roar, its maw agape with destructive intent. The vortex around him surges with violent force, tearing up the very ground and tossing massive boulders into the air like mere pebbles. Struggling against the crushing atmosphere, the young hunter gasps for air while his companions watch in mounting dread. The princess cries out that he must fight the wind itself, but the prince realizes with grim certainty that if this pressure persists, they are all lost. As the cyclone reaches a fever pitch, the massive beast prepares to deliver a final, crushing blow to the immobilized warrior. Suddenly, his eyes widen in shock as several jagged shards of energy are pulled into the vortex, hurtling directly toward his defenseless form. His name echoes across the battlefield as his allies scream in terror, watching him get battered by the relentless gale. The prince watches, convinced that no human could possibly withstand such a concentrated assault. Despite the overwhelming odds, the blacksmith and the princess notice a strange shift in the vortex's center, wondering why the wind's lethal pressure seems to be faltering or changing. The prince's jaw drops in disbelief as a brilliant radiance begins to seep from the young man's skin, illuminating the dark heart of the storm just as the dragon closes in. He feels a sudden, intense heat radiating from the beast, wondering what sort of devastating maneuver it is preparing as its maw begins to glow with a terrifying intensity. Without warning, the dragon unleashes a blinding torrent of pure energy, a beam that cuts through the air with terrifying speed and power. The impact is cataclysmic, a deafening roar of light and sound that consumes the landscape and sends the hunters flying amidst desperate cries of pain. As the initial flash fades, the silhouette of the great dragon remains visible through the thick, roiling smoke and rising embers of the scorched earth. Beneath the weight of the debris, the young swordsman and the blacksmith lie motionless, their bodies battered by the sheer force of the explosion. They slowly regain consciousness, blinking away the dust. She is struck by the monster's overwhelming power, while he can still see the lingering brilliance of that strange light. In a matter of moments, the once vibrant field of flowers has been transformed into a scorched wasteland, a literal hell on earth. Coughing through the soot, the group struggles to find their footing, while the blacksmith despairs, questioning how they could possibly defeat such a godlike entity. The leader of the hellhounds firmly commands them not to give up. The young swordsman, though struggling to breathe, checks on his companion's well-being, refusing to let the overwhelming destruction break their spirit. He kneels amidst the devastation, his hands gripping the hilt of his blade as if it were a lifeline. In a low, desperate plea, he calls out to his departed master, begging for the strength he feels he lacks due to his own inexperience. Driven by this desperate need, the young hunter stands his ground against the towering radiance of the shining dragon. He roars a plea to the heavens, not for personal glory, but for the sheer power required to shield his fallen friends from the impending annihilation. While he prepares for his final stand, The prince watches from the periphery, his expression unreadable as he observes the unfolding struggle. Away from his watchful gaze, the blacksmith finds her own resolve amidst the pain. A faint smile touching her lips as she realizes that the desire to protect outweighs any simple urge for victory. Inspired by her companion's grit, the princess can't help but notice the striking resemblance in spirit, seeing the same unwavering fire in her friend that has always defined him. She watches as he finally understands the truth, his blood-streaked face hardening with a new clarity as he realizes that his true strength doesn't come from within, but from the very presence of the comrades standing by his side. Shiki's voice rings out, a clarion call for his companions to unite. He urges them to show the beast the true strength of hunters working in perfect harmony, their combined might finally coalescing into a single, focused force. A deafening roar shakes the very ground as the creature reels from the initial strike, its massive jaws snapping in a blind, pained reflex. Observing the beast's resilience, the prince realizes that brute force alone won't suffice. While the blacksmith targets the creature's vulnerable underbelly with a thunderous blast, he decides to focus his efforts on its powerful legs to bring the titan down. In response, the blacksmith shouts her defiance, vowing to hold the monster's attention as she unleashes a devastating explosion that wreaths the beast's head in smoke and fire. Despite her outward bravado, she feels a flicker of doubt, wondering if her shots are truly making a dent in such a colossal foe. Yet she knows she cannot stop now. She continues her relentless assault, the heavy thud of her weapon echoing through the clearing as another projectile finds its mark against the creature's side. Watching her companion's efforts, the princess readies her own massive weapon, her mind racing with a singular goal. She understands that if she can land a crippling blow to the legs, the battle will be won, and she will be able to protect everyone she holds dear. She lunges forward with everything she has, her voice ringing out with the declaration that she is capable of protecting everyone. The ground beneath her feet cracks as she pours her resolve into strike. This determination is fueled by a singular purpose, to ensure the safety of her companions. Every fiber of her being is focused on this defensive stand. With a defiant cry that she will not be defeated, she brings her massive weapon down. The impact is thunderous, a testament to her unwavering spirit in the face of the colossal threat. Seeing the opening she created, her ally joins the fray, shouting that they must give it everything they've got. They both realize that their coordinated assault is actually having an effect on the beast. Watching from a short distance, the leader of the Hellhounds considers the possibility of their victory. His thoughts are punctuated by a massive, concussive blast that rocks the battlefield. He smiles, acknowledging that this desperate struggle has forged a true sense of teamwork. In this dire situation, he sees a power emerging that can only be born from hope. He closes his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself amidst the chaos. Opening them with a sharp, competitive glint, he acknowledges his comrades not just as allies, but as the finest rivals he could ask for. He watched as the young hunter grinned with a reckless, infectious confidence, seemingly undeterred by the scale of the beast before them. But that confidence was short-lived as the dragon's form began to shift and pulse with a terrifying new energy. Sakuya gasped at the sight of its regenerating body, while Eri screamed for everyone to fall back. Even the seasoned leader of the Hellhounds was shaken, unable to believe the creature was returning to full strength so quickly. Before they could reposition, the dragon unleashed a devastating wave of pure energy that tore through the battlefield. The sheer force of the blast sent the hunters flying like leaves in a storm. Amidst the chaos, Sakuya braced herself, knowing this was their last chance to strike before the monster fully recovered. She poured every ounce of her will into her weapon, a silent plea on her lips for the mechanism to hold and the aim to be true. With a thunderous crack, the projectile found its mark, exploding against the dragon's skull in a blinding flash of light. As the smoke began to dissipate, she watched with bated breath, her heart sinking as she saw her companions sprawled on the ground, unable to move. The smoke cleared to reveal the dragon still standing, its gaze fixed and its power seemingly undiminished. Prince could only stare in horror as the realization dawned that their ultimate gambit had failed to fell the beast. He watches as the massive beast, Myogrina, recoils from the impact, its radiant form flickering under the pressure of the assault. Seeing the result of her effort, Sakuya breaks into a relieved smile, her face slick with sweat as she realizes her desperate gambit actually found its mark. Nearby, Shiki gasps in awe, his eyes wide as he witnesses the legendary dragon finally faltering. Still grounded and gasping for breath, the blacksmith urges her companions to seize the moment. She explains that she has fired her special binding shot and pleads with them to use this chance, warning that the restraint won't hold the creature for long. Hearing the call, Eri watches with bated breath as Shiki charges forward, screaming for him to aim his strike directly at the dragon's head while the opening remains. The battlefield becomes a blur of motion as the hunters coordinate their final push, with the prince and Eri providing the necessary distraction for the decisive blow. High above the fray, Shiki plunges through the air, his twin blades glowing with intent as he narrows the distance between himself and the roaring beast. With a final, guttural cry, he brings his weapons down, his gaze fixed on the target with unwavering resolve as he commits everything to this single strike. He is the focus of their collective dread as Eri and Sakuya watch in disbelief, their voices trailing off in a mix of denial and shock at the sheer recklessness of the moment. Watching the desperate gambit, the prince realizes that at this exact moment, the sword is the only thing that matters as the young hunter hurtles toward the dragon's gaping maw. Gravity begins to take its toll, and as he starts to plummet, Sakuya cries out in alarm that he is falling, while he can only curse the precariousness of his position. Seeing him struggle, Eri screams his name with every ounce of her being, her face a mask of raw emotion as she prepares to offer her unwavering support. Her voice rings out with absolute conviction, telling him that she believes in him, and he answers with a fierce, revitalized roar of agreement, his spirit reignited. Now inches from the beast's fangs, he prepares his twin blades while the prince marvels at the unorthodox technique, noting that he has never seen a long sword wielded with such dual-handed precision, especially one imbued with the power of the wind. With a final, explosive effort, he unleashes a whirlwind of strikes, his blades becoming a blur of steel that carves through the air with lethal intent. The decisive blow connects, sending a spray of dark essence into the air as he tears through the dragon's defenses, leaving the massive creature reeling from the impact. He lets out a primal shout, his face smeared with the grime of battle, but his eyes burning with the fire of victory. Nearby, the young huntress watches in awe as the massive beast is swallowed by a cascading wall of dust and debris, its once radiant form finally succumbing to the force of the impact. The prince can only stare, a look of genuine astonishment crossing his features as he witnesses the impossible feat. A thick, suffocating shroud of white smoke expands across the battlefield, masking the final moments of the struggle. Through the haze, the blacksmith's daughter breaks into a wide, relieved smile, the weight of the world finally lifting from her shoulders. Slowly, the turbulent clouds begin to settle, revealing the quiet stillness that follows a storm. There, amidst the settling earth, lies the great shining dragon, its colossal body motionless and defeated. The young hunter throws his head back and bellows a triumphant cry to the heavens, joined by the joyous laughter of his companions who have survived the trial together. He and his companions cry out in triumph, their voices echoing across the battlefield as they celebrate the impossible victory. The word master hangs in the air, a tribute to the one who guided them to this moment. As the dust of the final confrontation settles, a profound silence falls over the land, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new legend. In the aftermath, the world begins to change. The guild officially dissolves the system of marked hunters, and a dedicated chronicler sits amidst the quiet mountains, meticulously recording the events of the great hunt. He feels a writer's instinct to turn these incredible adventures into a story that will never be forgotten. These records eventually become a series of 13 volumes, detailing every harrowing encounter, from the deadly clash with the fire-breathing rat halos to the defense against the colossal Lao Shanlong. The name of the young hunter and his friends becomes known across every corner of the world. Generations later, these books are still read and cherished by hunters everywhere, their pages inspiring new dreams of adventure. While the stories have become legendary, this particular tale is not one of the distant future, but of the here and now. High above the rugged terrain, a lone dragon soars through the clouds, a reminder that the world remains vast and full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. Beneath that same sky, the group of heroes, Shiki, Eri, Sakuya, and Prince, march forward together, their spirits unbroken and their blades ready. With a collective shout to move out, they continue their journey. For as long as there are monsters to hunt, their story will never truly end.